separate bank accounts, so we can take, well, what you want from all of that. The list that you gave is unbelievable. 124,000 in a camper van, Fortnum and Mason's picnic hampers, a couple of lawnmowers, one for 3,000 quid, three Davic Savile umbrellas, £970. The list goes. A wine coaster. I needed to look up what a wine coaster was. 3,500 quid. So the list goes on.
When you're talking about crimes as vicious as rape, serial murder, really depraved crimes, it's quite clear to me that the usual considerations around whether you should be lenient because of this context, whether or not there should be more room for rehabilitation in that context, just don't apply. From the simple commonsensical basis that if someone is capable of doing that, they're a threat to society.
But this is the thing,
I don't want to take that risk.
If these kids genuinely, you know, and they are kids, everyone involved's a kid. I mean, this is absolute travesty. If they don't know that all of these things are wrong, then by definition, we need them off the street.
Yeah. So there's now a label for children who skip school. You know, parents can't sort it out. In the old days, I used to think that skipping school was you know, against the law. You know, and parents used to be taken to court. Well, no longer anymore. They found a label now, Ian, which allows them to sit at home. Again, I keep saying, you know, on tablets, wasting their time.
Wow.
You know, universities. Let's get everyone going to university. Well, I think a fundamental job of education is to prepare children for the society they're going to live in a positive way, i.e. prepare them for a job. You've got the welfare state, I've already said, wonderful thing, isn't it? But a safety net, not a way of life.
Henry Novak's last words were, "I can't breathe," as he was handcuffed, having been stabbed not only in the front but in the back as well, you know. Okay, he stabbed him in the chest twice, stabbed him in the face once, stabbed him in the back of the leg twice. I mean, what an attack. Let's wait and see what sentence this vile piece of garbage gets. Of course, none of it of which will bring back dear Henry. May his soul rest in peace.
It's just so shocking, Pete, you know. I mean, this is... We're so used to criticising the police for mistakes. This is the worst one I've ever come across.
But it's where you've got with this woke, fluffy, liberal...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. A very, very good morning to you. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, I really appreciate you joining me. If you're watching on YouTube with a connected device, great to have you join us as well. Lots to talk about on the show, and yeah, no doubt at all. You can guess it. Henry Novak and his death, and what happened to him at the hands of the police, not just the man who murdered him with his in bare hands, is the subject of the hour. We had protests violently clashing with police in Southampton last night, chanting "I can't breathe" at officers after body cam footage showed Henry Novak, of course, being handcuffed as he bled to death after being stabbed, saying those very words. "Take the knee," many of them shouted. Now, I'm not entirely sure that a protest that turns violent is a helpful way of actually, you know, trying to get action after this man's death. But some people seem to think it is. We are right to be angry, but you know what? Throwing stuff at the police, getting angry, I'm not entirely sure that is going to make our argument stronger. Keir Starmer said there were serious questions for police after footage showed him being handcuffed after those false claims by his killer, Vikram Digwa, amid criticisms of two-tier policing. Lots of pressure right now on the police to drop the policies which I think many of us believe have led to that man dying without getting a single bit of help from the police, who just thought, well, he was just a racist drunk thug. That's what they thought. Also going to talk about a few other stories along the way. But I do want to address the Henry Novak case and what has happened since I was on air yesterday. Because after his son's murderer was sentenced on Monday, Mark Novak said of his son, "We do not want his death to be used to create further division, hatred or tension. We want his story to help make our streets safer for everyone." Since then, Nigel Farage, the Tories and pretty much everyone else, people like me, we're all being accused of stoking that very division, hatred and tension that Mark Novak talked about. But it's not people speaking about Henry Novak's death that creates this division. It's the act itself. The death of a young man, as police did nothing to try to save him because they thought he was just another drunk, racist thug. Why do they think that? Because a man of Asian appearance had told them that's what he was. The police have created that division and those tensions with a policy of inequality, of unfairly treating ethnic minorities better than white people. If you think I'm just making that up because I'm a far-right bigot, think again. It's officially in the policy guidance. It's written in black and white. The National Police Chiefs Council states that its goal is, I quote, producing equality of policing outcomes. Well, that sounds good, doesn't it? And that this, quote, does not mean treating everyone the same or being colourblind. They've written it down in black and white. It cannot be denied. This so-called anti-racism, this obsession with race, has created a two-tier society which treats people differently because of the colour of their skin. It has created two-tier policing. It has created two-tier Britain. So Henry Novak's death is not an isolated incident that's being exploited by the far right. It's just people seeing again and again the fruits of a, yes, let's call it what it is, an anti-white ideology that keeps costing lives. And people saying, we've had enough. And by the way, it's not just white people saying that, it's people of all ethnicities saying that. They don't want this treatment to be unequal. This goes back so far, and people have been noticing it for so long. How can we possibly say that it's divisive and hateful to talk about it? Pakistani Muslim grooming gangs allowed to operate across Britain with impunity, raping thousands of white working class girls. And why was no action taken? Because everyone was worried about community tensions and they were going to be accused of being racist if they interfered. And even talking about it right now makes you, well, far-right dog whistler and jumping on a far-right bandwagon to quote to government ministers. The Southport riots, police acted firmly, well, very firmly. Prosecutions were ruthless for people tweeting, not people throwing bricks, but not for the armed Muslim gangs on the scene that very evening. They were just told to go and take their machetes back to the mosque and go home. Just weeks before that, the Hare Hills riot saw the police retreat. Why? Because ethnic minorities were involved. What about the policing of the pro-Palestinian marches versus the policing of the Unite the Kingdom marches? Completely different styles. And after every single terror attack, the vast majority of which carried out by far extremist Islamist terrorists, we're told, don't look back in anger, sing Kumbaya, light candles, beware of any community tensions. The security guard at the Manchester Arena, who didn't stop the suicide bomber because he was afraid of being called a racist. The bomber killed 22 people. He injured over 1,000. One of his victims was an 8-year-old girl. What about the head teacher, who raised concerns about acts of Rudy Cabana, saying he was very high risk to others? She was accused of racial stereotyping him. Rudy Cabana went on to kill 3 young girls and wound 10 others. What about the Nottingham killer, Valdo Callicane, who was released from a mental health hospital because authorities said they thought they would be called racist due to the fact that there were more young men who were black represented in mental health detention, and so they couldn't keep him behind bars. He went on to kill 3 and injure 3 others. And then an 18-year-old student on a night out ends up being handcuffed and read his rights by police as he lies bleeding to death on the ground, begging for help, telling officers he can't believe and that he's been stabbed, as the man who has stabbed him says, no, he hasn't. And the police officer says to him, I don't think you have, mate. The list goes on. And we're led to believe they're all one-offs. These are all one-offs. But they aren't one-offs, and they aren't glitches in the system. These deaths are all a product of the system. As Nigel Farage rightly points out, we should all be angry. And as Kemi Badenoch rightly says, Henry Novak's death must be a seminal moment for Britain, on a par with the murder of Stephen Lawrence back in 1993. The pendulum has swung far, far too much in a bid after Stephen Lawrence to tackle police racism against black people. Now it is openly, in black and white, racist against white people. But facing facts and changing the culture of the police, where an accusation of racism is the worst possible thing anyone can do, isn't furthering division, hate or tension. It's the police policies and the police culture and their actions that are doing that. If we want to live in a society that is truly fair and truly equal, then our police must act without fear or favour, whatever the colour of our skin. And that is how you end the division. That is how you end the hate. And that is how you end the tension. So, I want to hear your thoughts. Do get in touch, please, because politicians and protesters have been accused of exploiting Henry Novak's murder to stir up division and violence against the wishes of his family. I want to know your reaction to that. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Give us a call on give us a call on that number. Text us on 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate and text cost £1 standard network rate message. Today I am joined by Benedict Spence. He joins me for a chat about all the biggest stories in the news. Joining me for the whole show. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
So I've taken up quite a lot of our time. I will leave it to you. Your reaction to... I suppose not. We talked a lot yesterday about the murder, what happened on the night. 4 times telling the police he's been stabbed, and 9 times telling the police that he couldn't breathe, and being told, "I don't think you have, mate." I mean, I think everyone's horrified by that video, horrified by it all. We had protests last night, speeches organised by Tommy Robinson. We then had violence. We've had some arrests, clashes with police, people throwing stuff at the police. We've had all these accusations of exploitation against the likes of Nigel Farage. We've had, Kemi Badenoch and Nigel Farage getting into a war of words. What do you make of it all?
I mean, well, it's rather undignified, but it's to be expected, ultimately, because, as much as politicians can sit here and say, please don't politicise the issue, even if this wasn't a particularly exceptional murder is always political. That's, what the state is in part there to prevent people doing things like that to each other. So to try and sort of, spin this in one direction, then go, oh, actually, it's this person's fault for politicising it. No, it was a political issue the second that the murder took place in the way that it did, and the second that the police responded in the way that it did. I'm sorry if that upsets people, and whilst there are lots of people saying you should respect the wishes of the family who say they don't want it to be politicised, I'm sorry, victims' families do not get the monopoly on how to respond to things when it affects all of us. Murder, I'm afraid, is a threat to all of us, and this is not an isolated murder, because as you've touched upon, Julia, there have been a series of cases of murders in this country, of young people. There's also been a rather growing list of sexual assaults that are being committed against people as well. So for, victims to then turn around, or their families to turn around and go, well, I still adhere to the ideology that has given us this thing, and I still believe in it.
I don't think that was what Mark Novak was saying.
No, I don't think it's just in this case.
I think people are misinterpreting that.
Finbar Sullivan did do that, and that's the most recent example. Before this, he turned around and said he gave lots of nonsense examples about how this shouldn't be used to divide us. And I think he touched upon all sorts of political issues as a way of saying, please don't politicise it.
And this is the thing, over the grooming gangs, don't talk about it because it divides us. There'll be community tensions. Well, I mean, again, after terror attacks, the first thing you hear from a lot of politicians on the left is, oh, we don't want any repercussions to the Muslim community. It's like, sorry, why are you even mentioning that? If you're saying this isn't Islam, why are you even mentioning that? Let's worry about the people who are dying. By the way, often including Muslims. But this is the thing, isn't it? This idea that when people say we should be angry about this, again, I've long been I don't look back in, I don't look back in anger. I am angry about this. We should all be angry with this. You don't get change by just wringing your hands and going, oh dear.
Yeah, and this is the tricky thing, because to go back to what you were saying at the very top of the show, which was how it's not great that there is therefore violence as a result of this because it doesn't help the argument. I'm afraid this is the norm in multicultural societies. And for all that we have had this push...
We never agreed for multicultural society.
Well, no, we didn't. But this is what we've been told that we've got. And our elites have said this for decades, that Britain... unbeknownst to us, is and has always been multicultural, and that we all just have to get on with it.
A nation of immigrants.
At every single truly multicultural society across the world, every act of democracy or politics is backed up by the threat of inter-ethnic or inter-religious violence. That's just the norm. Listen, if that's what you want in this country, fine, but it's not what I want. I don't think it's what you want. I don't think it's what anybody voted for.
The vast majority of people of every ethnicity wants.
But if this is what continues to be pushed on us, this will be the norm, because this is how people understand politics is done.
Yeah, Exactly. We never signed up to a multicultural society. I've got no issue with it being a multiracial society. I know there are people who disagree with me on that. It doesn't make any difference to me what colour someone is. It does make a difference to me whether someone speaks the language, whether someone accepts the values and norms and culture of this country or not. Those are the things that I care about. But this is the thing. We have got a police force, and we have a political class and a media class, largely, with some honourable exceptions, where basically, they are signed up to this, I would say, woke madness that is basically destroying the West, destroying our Western civilization, the liberality that is basically creating illiberalism, creating, curtailing our free speech and curtailing our rights, and creating these divisions and treating people based on their innate qualities, rather than based on their consciences, their actions, their deeds, their words. That is a growing thing. Now, we're told, there's no two-tier policing. I mean, we've been told that a million times, haven't we, by the Labour Party? And in fact, it was happening under the Tories for a long time as well. There's long been two-tier policing, and as I read out just now, it's in black and white. The police, it's not just Hampshire Police. Forget Hampshire Police, they were, for whom these two or three officers worked for, who attended to Henry Novak's death. This is across the board. We're going to be talking later in the show to Rick Pryor. He's the former head of the Police Federation, who basically got sacked for speaking out about how police officers are terrified. The worst thing that can happen to you is being accused of racism. That's your number one consideration. Everything is about race now. Trans, race, but race is the number one thing. Police officers that I know say it's exactly the same thing. Most police officers who are half sane, who've been there in the force for a long time, are desperate. They're counting down the minutes till they can retire because it's no longer the job that they want to do. And they're not being able to police without fear or favour. But last night we had these demonstrations. We had these, speeches and demonstrations, which turned into protests outside the police station, and then moved nearer the home of Vikram Digwa, the murderer. I mean, let's not forget him. We had 2 arrests. It was announced this morning by the policing minister. Hampshire Police said 11 officers and a police dog were injured after those violent clashes. I mean, we've been playing some of the footage. You can see the footage. It's, it's some very, very nasty scenes. I mean, thanks, Tommy Robinson. Always helpful to get involved, But what do you make of the criticisms of... Look, I think a lot of these people are just thugs. I think the most powerful protests are always the very calm, peaceful ones. Those are always the ones that actually send the strongest message. But, I think this is absolutely and utterly undermining the cause. But what do you make of, the likes of Nigel Farage saying, there should be a hot rage about this?
I mean, as I say, I disagree that peaceful protest is necessarily the most powerful, because what actually makes it powerful is the underlying implicit threat of violence, that if you don't acquiesce, that actually something else could come of it. We've had lots of peaceful protests in this country that have come to nothing. And whilst that's not me actually saying that violent protest is a good thing, I'm saying that this is the thing that the state, I think, has forgotten, actually, what it is that makes...
Actually, they do act when it's...
Well, this is the thing, ultimately, watching all of this, a lot of it is in part because there is an understanding that the police, as you've just touched upon, is increasingly weak because so many police officers are leaving because they're being asked to do things that are beyond their remit or they don't have the resources to do. When it comes to Nigel Farage saying what he's saying, I think that he will have taken the position that I'm going to get criticised anyway. It doesn't matter what happens, reform are going to be the butt of all of this. I might as well get out ahead of it anyway because people will be angry. He's not telling people to feel anger that they don't already feel. Yeah. He's tapping into something that already exists.
You couldn't look at that video and not be angry and upset and horrified.
And he called for cold anger or rage or whatever it was. He didn't turn around and say
cold
take to
rage.
the streets or anything like that. Actually, cold, I think everybody would understand, is that kind of quite still, reserved kind of rage that
that's where a protest like that outside the police, it's people saying saying Henry's name and people saying I can't breathe, which is what was chanted, of course, after the George Floyd death, and but again, something that happened 4,000 miles away, nothing to do with us whatsoever. But the idea that people shouldn't politicise it, just saying this is awful. But hold on a minute, politicians on the left literally lost their minds over the death of George Floyd. It had nothing to do with us whatsoever, completely different policing environment. no issue. We've got nothing like the same issues of police violence in this country. I mean, it's just rubbish, absolute rubbish. And there was a complete root and branch look at our policing. We had our Premier League footballers and our England footballers taking the knee for God knows how many years afterwards. I mean, I want to know. I was speaking out against that on day one and always continue to do so. They politicise that. This is actually a case relevant not just to Henry Novak's family, but to all of us. The idea that we could be the victim of a horrific crime and the police can be called and they don't try to save our life because someone says, who has got an approved skin colour as opposed to an unapproved skin colour, that you've said something racist, and that trumps everything else.
Yes.
That makes it my business, it makes it your business, it makes it the business of everybody, of every ethnicity in this country.
Yes, but this is again why ultimately it is the implied threat of violence that matters here. Because even if Henry Novak had been racist, even if he'd said the most appalling things, it does not justify his murder.
Exactly.
It would not have justified him being arrested whilst he was bleeding to death on the floor. It would not have justified that.
And not being believed.
He did not. He was smeared. It is a disgrace that even during the trial, the family members, his family members, were shouting that the Novak family were racist because they understand the power that we have given that. They understand that if you throw enough mud, some of it might just stick and you might be ignored your wrongdoing. That's what they gambled on then. That is what they continue to gamble on now. It is wrong that in any sense racism or allegations of racism is prioritised above physical acts of violence.
Yes,
that
but if you have
always what it should be.
If you believe in this critical race theory and you believe that whites are oppressors and anyone who's any other colour is oppressed, and if you believe that there is just white guilt and only white racism and that we are all saying I'm not racist automatically, that's because it's unconscious. But if that is your mindset, and that is what the police are now being told they must either believe or pretend to believe and certainly act on. If you have that mindset, then this is what happens.
Yeah. Listen, put it this way. Ask somebody, what would you rather? Somebody calls you a mean name or they break your nose. 99.999 times out of 100, they'll say, pick the name. And the one who says break my nose is probably a former boxer, so it doesn't matter. But I think actually here's something that I think is worth touching on, and it's relevant to another country. Yesterday was 6 years to the day since a leading group of American academics and scientists wrote an open letter to the entire US media calling white supremacy an international health crisis. And I just think this was at the height of the COVID hysteria and everything that was going on in the middle of the pandemic, and they turned around and said, the real problem is white on black racism. And here we are downstream of that in another country half a decade later with the result of that, which is that a boy was stabbed to death and the police handcuffed him because they went, oh, maybe he has, but he might have said something mean against an ethnic minority, and that's worse.
And that is where we are. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear your thoughts on the protests last night. I want to hear your thoughts on the political battles going on between the various different political parties. I want to know what you think about Shabana Mahmood, she's the Home Secretary. She's condemned unacceptable violence, 2 arrests. I know there are plenty of people there who were not violent, who just wanted a peaceful protest. They were perfectly in their rights to do that. This blatant race bias, it's in black and white. That the police has. How do we get rid of that? They're told they're going to look at it. Trust me, these people, everyone who works in the top echelons of the police, their HR, their chief constables, they are so imbued with this stuff. They think us even discussing this makes us racist bigots. Trust me. So how on earth are we going to root that stuff out, especially with a government that's also signed up to a lot of this madness? They might talk the talk. Trust me, they're signed up to it. Oh yeah, and most of the BBC and Sky News, most of the British media signed up to this madness as well. How on earth do you root this stuff out when all the powers that be, when all the great and the good are fully signed up to this madness? When this madness is quite literally costing lives. I want to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. We'll get your calls up next. This is Talk.
across the UK on your mobile and on your site.
Good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:26 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. Russell is in New for us, wants to have his say. Hello, Russell. What do you want to say?
Oh, hi, Julia.
Hi.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I was there last night at the protest at Southampton Central Police Station. I didn't go on towards the violent sort
Wise
of thing
decision.
in Portswood. Yeah, I was there last year actually and got arrested in Portswood, so it wasn't
What
good
were you protesting
decision.
then?
About the hotels. About
Oh, okay,
migrants.
yeah.
So I got racially abused for about 10 minutes by a certain group of the community, and I said one word and got arrested.
That's Portsmouth. Right, OK. We go back to last night. What was the purpose?
Portswood of Southampton.
What was the purpose of going down to the protest at Southampton Police Station?
Last night was to show solidarity for a boy that's his life got taken too short. The fact that there's two-tier policing clearly within the countrywide is unacceptable, and I think the ugly scenes last night are the culmination of just people being pushed too far.
Yeah,
and it's the white people of this country that are being pushed too far. It's anti-white racism now that's rife within every sphere of our lives.
Yeah. I mean, if you were on the phone saying this to me 5 years ago, I'd have gone, Russell, you're talking rubbish. I would, and now I'm just like, I don't. It's just, I mean, I say it's written in black and white. It's literally written in black and white in the policing advice and policies.
You know, most people there last night are just normal, everyday people that are paying their taxes and want to go to work, look after their families and go on holiday once or twice a year and just be living in harmony. And we're being pushed constantly. Yeah. And it's going to end. The country is now a pressure cooker. It's a powder keg. And it's going to eventually, I think the only way it's going to end is civil disruption throughout the whole country.
This is something I was
nobody wants that.
I was messaging with a very senior politician last night about this, saying something's going to have to change. Do you think there is any evidence that the people in charge? I know, look, everyone says, "Oh, the Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood, she talks a good game," and and all this, but that anyone actually in charge, that the police, the senior figures in civil service, in government, that they got a clue just how angry people are. Do you think they just write off everybody as a far right thug?
That's exactly what we get written off as. It's so easy to be able to just say they're far right and be written off. Yeah. That they're not in touch with reality. They don't go to these protests and see the sort of people that are there. They're pushing aside our rights to live in our country in a way that we want to live, not how they are telling us we're going to live.
Yeah, I understand that. And what do you make of the people who did get violent? And look, they were, police officers were injured. We've seen a lot of footage. There were a lot of people down there who were just live streaming, go to my live feed, and then pay some money to me. There are people who are trying to exploit this. I would include Tommy Robinson in this, who organised not the violent protests, but the protests outside. I mean, never one to miss an opportunity, is our Tommy. What do you make of?
I do have a slight issue with you and Tommy Robinson because obviously he's done some unsavoury things in the past, but I think now he's there for the good of...
Yeah, he's there for the good of Tommy, trust me. He's there for the good of Tommy. He doesn't give two hoots about you, Russell. I can tell you that for a fact. I'm telling you that. Tommy Robinson cares only about Stephen Yaxley Lennon. That's all he cares about.
Yeah, I think he cares about the rape gangs and the girls that have been abused throughout the country. I think he cares about the direction of the country. I think he is doing a lot more good than Keir Starmer does for the country.
Oh, well, I mean, I don't think that would be hard. I mean,
Keir Starmer needs to understand the damage that his woke lefty ideologies are ruining this country, and we need to get back to common sense. Donald Trump
and fairness
stopped it all overnight when he got into power. And Nigel Farage needs to do the same.
Okay.
He needs to stop it all with one sentence and say enough is enough.
Russell, appreciate your call. Really interesting to hear from you. Thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Laura Jane. She's in Hampshire, of course. It was Hampshire Police Force that were involved in this. Laura Jane, what do you want to say?
Good morning, Julia.
Morning.
Yes, I'm about 40 minutes from Southampton,
Yeah.
but no, I didn't go. I want to look at the wider picture. If we start from Kemi, who said every lives matter, which of course we all agree with. Of course, every life matters.
All lives matter. Yeah, but if you said that in 2020 after the Black Lives Matter thing, you were literally called a racist. People actually lost their jobs for saying that.
Yes, well, by the time you get to my age, you don't give a toss when you still say things. But the thing I want to look at is it's easy to say that from opposition on the other side of the government benches. What concerns me is the wider picture of how people forget that the Conservative government said a lot and did nothing. And I worry that the government of whoever the government of the day is always frightened of looking at the issues underneath in case they stir up. And as much as I don't like what Sir Keir Starmer said, and, he was obviously prevaricating and he didn't want to, that is the government. And that's what we have to look at, the wider picture, and maybe Nigel Farage will be stronger. I don't know, but it's difficult to not think it.
Yeah.
That the government of the day...
Whoever it is, everyone talks good game, but when you're the government of the day, you don't actually do anything about it. I mean, certainly the Tories didn't. Kemi Badenoch, to be fair, and she's been accused by Nigel Farage and quite a few attackers, which I thought were really unnecessary, really unseemly, and in no way helped the cause. Oh, you said Black Lives Matter. Actually, in a speech, she said Black Lives Matter, but also, and, she wasn't actually just parroting that at all. I mean, in her defence. So she was someone who was speaking out.
Well, we have to hope that, were it to be a Conservative government, that they would. I just think that the 14 years of the Conservatives showed us that they don't, that they also sit on the fence and say they're going to do things. And this is, this is the worrying thing for us. I talk about children and grandchildren because I'm, of that age. And I feel very strongly that we are incapable now of governing and really looking at the underlying problems. And obviously rape gangs is included in that. And I'm sick and tired of people in government saying at Prime Minister's question time, Epstein's victims, I'm so sorry for them. What about our girls up and down the country?
As I've always said, that's just geography in terms of how these girls were raped, isn't it? Laura Jane, a really interesting call. Thank you very much. Quick response from Benedict Spence.
I think that right there is an encapsulation of why when Nigel Farage talks about people being angry, he's not leading people on a merry dance. They're already there. All he is doing is being the only politician that I think is actually showing some sort of similar level to much of the public in how angry they actually are.
Absolutely. 10:34 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking to former Met Police Detective Peter Blexley. That's up next. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:36 is the time. Let's go straight to Peter Bleckstein, who's a former Metropolitan Police detective, talking about, obviously, there's the aftermath of this horrific murder of Henry Novak. Good morning to you, Peter.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. First of all, I just want to get your response to what happened last night in the streets of Southampton. First of all, a protest organised by Tommy Robinson. And the police have said some protesters clearly arrived intent on causing disorder and trouble. There were 2 arrests. Likely, they were using lots of, camera footage. There will be more arrests. We've seen some, very unpleasant scenes of police officers being attacked, stuff being thrown at them. She said that... we had 11 officers injured, 1 dog also injured, the police's, the force's top officer said that number will rise. What do you make of those particular protests and the ones that turned violent later?
I'm a huge defender and fan and supporter of peaceful protests. It is, of course, part of the bedrock of our democracy, of our nation. But anybody who turns up at a protest and then wants to be violent towards police officers is, quite frankly, in my opinion, an idiot, and I'm being polite. There is no need for it. There is no excuse for it. I fully understand the heightened tensions around this tragic, dreadful murder of Henry Novak, and many people have a lot of questions to answer about their behaviour. I would say particularly the Deputy Chief Constable of Hants Police, Mr. French, who last week came out, I think, trying to defend the indefensible. All these people need to start telling the truth. We have a shocking lack of truth-telling by people in positions of power, and that's what inflames tensions.
And this is the thing, isn't it? And lots of people are accusing both politicians and, the far right, the Tommy Robinson and others, of exploiting Henry Novak's death after his father very expressly called for people not to use it to further division and hate and tension. But as I was saying at the start of the show, that division and tension and hate is there. People are rightly angry, not just at the police, rightly angry at many incidents, one after each other, which are, not, as I pointed out, not glitches in the system, but actually part of, deliberate, outcomes of a system, which basically says, in black and white, in police guidance, you need to treat different people of different ethnicities and different communities differently.
Now, this cuts across police training, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And there is very clearly a problem if we've got police officers turning up to very serious incidents and assuming things, because assumption is the mother of all muck-ups. Yeah. And it would appear that here officers, excuse me.
Oh, dearie me.
Sorry, officers turned up, and they assumed brown-faced man is telling the truth, white-faced man has assaulted somebody. When, of course, the picture, if they'd dynamically assessed it and done their job properly, would have been very, very different.
And they didn't have to not believe Vikram Digwa, the killer. They could have believed him at the same time as they could have thought that Henry Novak was a horrible, racist, nasty Nazi thug. It didn't matter. It's irrelevant. If he says he's stabbed and he's got blood in his mouth, not checking and not believing him and just saying, I don't think you have, mate, without even lifting up his shirt more than an inch, that is, I mean, you've failed, policing 101 at that point.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm sure, I hope that the IOPC investigation comes to the conclusion that behaviour was at least gross misconduct, if not perhaps tipping over into misconduct in public office. Yeah. But we'll have to wait and see the outcome. The assumptions that were reached were lunatic, because picture the scene. We have a man who was apparently, they believe, as a result of what they're told, carried out a racist assault, and yet when they arrive, the first thing they see is the alleged assailant being propped up against the wall by the victim's brother.
Yeah.
It just
I think father, I think it was at that time. But this is it. None of it made sense. And again, but we've talked so much about this in more detail in the last couple of days. In terms of the reaction, in terms of what happens next, I mean, Obviously, there'll be more arrests and likely prosecutions and likely, given some of that video footage, convictions of those protesters who were on the streets last night. And I'm with you. I massively approve of peaceful protests. Very, very important. I made a point to my colleague here, Benedict Spence, earlier, that I thought, peaceful protests actually achieved much more dignified, and make your point, if you're concerned about this, being peaceful. But he actually pointed out that actually, the authorities kind of only pay attention when it turns violent, when they're kind of forced to act. I'm paraphrasing, but do you think that is the case, that actually no one really cares if it's not got the sort of, at the very least, the threat of violence?
Unfortunately, there's an element of truth in what you say. I met many people returning home from the Unite the Kingdom, Unite the West march the other week. I was in central London as it was dispersing. And I spoke to people and police officers who'd had a fabulous day.
Yeah.
They'd thoroughly enjoyed it.
Loads of people who were there, and they're just as, patriots, no troublemakers at all.
And the police officers had a good day because they weren't involved in violence. They didn't have to arrest people. Yeah. They had a chat and a laugh with decent, patriotic people. The officers' experience from last night is very, very different. And I will always have an element of sympathy for police officers who rock up to police protest only to have bricks, bottles and other things slung at them. It's a very unpleasant experience. I've been there. And, of course, now we have officers injured who may well not be going to work today. They may be sick for goodness knows how long. And, of course, that damages the police's ability to try and serve us. I know policing is far from perfect. I know there's huge problems with modern-day policing. I go on about it frequently. But I was told yesterday a wonderful line that I'm just going to throw out to you and Mr. Spence and your audience this morning. I was reminded of a line from police training of yesteryear, when officers were taught the only colour you see is blue.
Yeah.
The blue of the uniform, the blue of the thin blue line. And I think that's a great line and should possibly be reintroduced in the police training.
Absolutely. Do you think it is possible to root out this, and it's what it is, it's called critical race theory. Look, frankly, a lot of this stuff is even in my building. There's a load of wokery in the building that, the people who employ me, for goodness sake. There's people going on unconscious bias courses. I don't go on an unconscious bias course. All of my biases are very, very conscious and deliberate and fact-based, and therefore I don't need any training out of them. Thank you very much. But there's a load of wokery, whether it's trans or whether it's race. I mean, the Black Lives Matter thing exploded throughout sport, Premier League. Everyone taking the knee for ages. I mean, gosh, we had politicians taking the knee. We had Keir Starmer, all of that stuff. And it's across the media in many parts. Viewed the BBC and Sky. It's all over the civil service. It's all over the councils, all our politicians. I would say in most parties, not just in Labour, the Lib Dem, and the Greens. How do you root that out in the police service, the police force, as we used to call it, when it's in their bones? This isn't like cutting off a finger to save the limb. It's in their bones now.
And this was all started back in 1997 by Tony Blair and his left-wing Labour government. And unfortunately, it has spread like Japanese knotweed in the last few decades. And nobody has stood up and said, this is nonsense. We have to strip it out. We need to apply some common sense now. The only way it will be addressed, not only in policing, but through the public services as well, is if you get a committed two-term government, so they have 10 years to try and tackle it, and then just swing the pendulum of common sense back to where it needs to be.
In the middle.
Police training, for me, that would be, just to repeat, the only colour you see is blue, and never assume anything.
Really good to talk to you, Peter Plexi. Thank you very much. Former Met Police Detective, always talks sense. In Benedict, I mean, this thing, I mean, those of us who were raised, when we were talking about this on the show yesterday, the Martin Luther King view, you judge people, according to their actions, their deeds, their character, not the colour of their skin. This is now, exactly the opposite. After the Stephen Lawrence murder and after the Macpherson report, there was this, all police are racist, it's institutional racism. racism. Now we're told, everything's and everyone's racist. Society's racist. White people inherently racist. We are oppressors. That is the basis of critical race theory. It's taken hold across everywhere in America, particularly in schools and in the civil service there, and it's absolutely, it's in the bones of much of the public sector in this country. If you start from that perspective, how the hell do you get rid of it? Because the National Police Chiefs Council, they can rewrite things and say we're no longer doing that anymore. Rubbish. They're still going to be doing it because they believe it's true.
See, the problem is in this country, people will say, well, you need to reform things. But actually, the best way to do this is actually to wind up institutions and establish new ones from scratch, build them up and then slowly transfer
College of Policing, close it down today.
I mean, Italy, for instance, has multiple different police forces because, of course, we all know they had such problems with organised crime there that they actually had to separate them out and have different militarised police forces that sometimes work in tandem, but they exist for a reason because you couldn't just trust one unified police force. I'm sorry to say, we possibly have to accept that maybe if this is so deeply entrenched and, the culture of not responding to burglaries and all that stuff, if the culture there is that rotten, we may actually have to accept that, look, the United Kingdom once upon a time was this great pinnacle example, but it's not anymore, and sometimes you need drastic measures. Maybe that is what is needed to wrap up these organisations and start again.
College of Policing gone, I really think we probably need to basically get rid of every chief constable and start again on that front. Virtually everybody in the highest echelons or anywhere up the ladder in the police now, if you don't sign up to this stuff, pretend to believe it, even if you don't, then you haven't got a career. Simple as that. How do we do that? I want to hear from you. Give us a call. If you're a police officer, and you don't have to give your real name, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well. 0344 499 1000, because no point us bleating about it. We needed to change it on the ground for people in real life, as they're lying, dying, bleeding out from a stab wound in someone's driveway. We need things to change, because next time it could be your son, it could be my daughter, it could be someone else in our families. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. Obviously, we are going to be talking a lot more about that horrific murder of Henry Novak and the police failures in the wake of him being stabbed by Vikram Digwa. I don't think we should ever forget Vikram Digwa's name. He's a rather important person. He's the only person blamed by the parents, by the way, for Henry Novak's death. It's as simple as that. But in the wake of protests, we've seen police say that some protesters in Southampton last night clearly arrived, they say, intent on causing disorder and trouble. Violent scenes. We've seen 2 arrests at Lumber is very much likely to rise. 11 police officers and a police dog have been injured. We'll talk more about that and these claims and cross-claims of whether or not politicians like Nigel Farage are exploiting this story for political gain, or are they just talking about the stuff that needs to be talked about? We've been told so many times, oh, don't talk about that, don't talk about that, or stoke community tensions, don't talk about that. Well, yeah, Where's that got us? I think we can all agree. I want to hear your thoughts on that story. 0344 499 1000. We'll get to more of your calls in the next hour. And don't forget, later in the show, we're going to be talking to Rick Pryor. He is a former boss of the Police Federation. That's the police officers' trade union, effectively. He was ousted from his job because he was speaking out about how impossible ordinary rank-and-file police officers were finding their job because of exactly the sort of policies in terms of treating ethnicities differently and the woke policies, how much that was hindering their ability to do the job they wanted to do. We'll be talking to him about how on earth we changed that culture. If even the Police Federation boot out people who speak out about it, and they're supposed to be the ones on the sides of ordinary officers. Anyway, all that coming up, but also want to talk about a few other stories. We were going to certainly talk in the next hour about Andy Burnham, the would-be candidate in the Makerfield by-election, who for Labour Party and wants to be the next Prime Minister, saying that if he does get elected, he will not be calling a snap election. Yeah, I wonder why mainly Labour MPs would not be keen on that. But let's talk about the current Labour government. And of course, our dear good friend, Red Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary, is back in the news. He has signed up to a legally binding goal to cut UK carbon emissions by 87% by 2040. To achieve that, all households will need to replace boilers with heat pumps, shift to electric cars and eat 25% less meat and a fifth less dairy, according to government advisers. So basically, for his mad lunatic targets that will achieve absolutely nothing and cost us an absolute fortune, we're going to be told we're going to have to eat less meat and dairy. And you think, well, I won't do that. Well, maybe you'll be forced to by the cost as they impose taxes to make us do that. Let's talk about this with Rupert Darwell, the author of Green Tyranny. A very good morning to you, Rupert.
Morning, Julia.
Thank you so much for joining us. Of course, this whole eating less meat and eating less dairy because, of course, of the emissions from the cattle, etc. This was always what was going to be required. This has been in the formal documents of the Climate Change Committee about how you would go about achieving any of their net zero targets. Long been planned, long been known that we wouldn't achieve any of these things, even if they were desirable, without massive changes to our own lives.
That's absolutely correct. If you go back to the Committee on Climate Change's net zero report that was given to Theresa May in 2019, it explicitly says that the benefits of net zero include healthier diets, forcing people out of their cars to walk more, basically lifestyle changes. Yeah. So this has always been there, and it's now just coming. It's now being made much more obvious. But go back to 2019, yep. It's all there.
Yeah, exactly. And whenever we've talked about this now, and I've had sort of the green zealots say to me, no, that's not required. And it's like, yeah, it is. It's literally stated in the documents. You wouldn't achieve this unless. Now, I tell you what, I'll eat whatever I darn well choose to eat, and everyone can say that, except when they price us out of being a lot of people able to afford meat and dairy, then people won't have as much choice. In the same way that we'll say, no, I still want to fly to Spain or France or Florida for my summer holiday. Well, actually, if you put so much tax on the costs and on the fuel, aviation fuel and that, actually you do make it impossible for a lot of people to afford to do those things.
I think the important thing is it won't just be done by cost. What the Climate Change Act does, and this 7th carbon budget does, is essentially it transfers power from elected politicians to NGOs and the courts. So what you could well see is NGOs saying the government isn't pursuing its duty to meet its carbon budget, therefore it should be doing this. So the government, and then you'll have civil servants telling ministers, well, you've got to do this, otherwise you're going to be taken to court to do it. And that will be the mechanism. It may be price, it may be rationing. I mean, we don't know what they'll come up with, but you can be sure they'll come up with something.
And they will, and they are totally signed up to this. I mean, there's no doubt, we've been saying for a long time, net zero doesn't survive contact with reality, and it really isn't. And I have to say, part of me is just, I'd rather we just had the blackouts and got them over and done with, so the British public would wake up and go, this is the madness that you and I have been talking about for so long. But Ed Miliband is, as far as we can tell, a true believer on this stuff and pushing these policies. But we're beginning to see in the papers some evidence of some pushback from the rest of the cabinet, realising this is an insanely unpopular policy. It's costing the economy. You can't have manufacturing jobs. You can't have cheap energy bills in the household. You can't be part of the AI revolution if you have energy that costs as much as it does, and it costs as much as it does because of net zero policies.
Yeah, I mean, that's the message of that supreme realist, dare I call Tony Blair the supreme realist, from his recent intervention.
Well, he is now.
And
he's changed his tune.
He's saying we mustn't sacrifice prosperity for the sake of net zero, and that cheap energy should take priority over clean energy. I mean, he could. I mean, it was brilliantly clear.
But he wasn't saying that a few years ago when it was fashionable to be in favour of net zero.
That's absolutely true. I think the big thing that has changed, because in that essay there's a lot about AI, and what he knows and what every intelligent person knows is that AI requires colossal amounts of energy, and that's only going to come from fossil fuels. So if you want the AI revolution, you're not going to have you got to forget all about net zero.
Yeah, it really is that simple. Do you think we are going to see the end of these net zero policies? Because as far as I can tell, he's doubling down on this stuff. Most people simply don't understand it. I always get people saying, "Oh, have you got a qualification in climate science?" No, neither does Ed Miliband, neither does Greta Thunberg or David Attenborough or King, or Prince William. But you seem to be listening to them, but they've got no more qualifications than I have in this field. But you only have to have the maths of a 6-year-old to actually read these documents and go, well, none of this adds up.
Well, I think there's one thing that if you look at I haven't trawled through the Mandelson files, but there's that Pat McFadden quote about just Labour MPs wanting welfare. But there aren't any cabinet ministers or ministers saying, well, net zero is killing us and killing the party.
Those perhaps wouldn't have been, unless there was a conversation with Mandelson about that wouldn't have been relevant, but that wouldn't have perhaps
I mean, what I'm saying is I don't think I've not seen real evidence that there is a strain in the Labour Party, apart from some of the blue Labour people. Other than that, there's very little to suggest that this is the ministers having a serious rethink on net zero. And if they are having a serious rethink, the only way you can change policy is by repealing the Climate Change Act. And I think there's zero chance of that happening. I think
and fear you are right. Rupert Darwell, author of Green Tyranny, thank you very much. Benedict Spence with me in the studio. We've talked about this, I mean, ad nauseum. But again, it's just like, I don't want anyone telling me whether I can fly, what car I can drive, what I can eat. I definitely don't want anyone messing with my heating. I feel very strongly about my central heating.
It's one of those things, isn't it, where, the response to people in power right now is to go backwards. It's a Luddite approach. Let's say climate change is going at the rate that they say that it's going, that it's all true, the worst-case scenario, all true. The best way to deal with that is not by going back to the caves. It's by ingenuity, it's by development, it's by technology. That is how you will deal with it in the worst-case scenario. And nobody actually thinks that it's the worst-case scenario, except these people. But, this is the thing. When we talk about, how technology can solve these things, this is why Elon Musk is trying to get to space. Because, if you reach level 2 on the Kardashev scale and you don't need to power data centres on Earth because you can use solar power on the moon, then you don't need to worry about these things. Does the British government think about that sort of thing? Not for a second.
Well, because
he says mean things on Twitter, and they would rather that we lived in the caves.
And again, it's the lack of joined-up thinking. It's the fact, we're going to have to be at the front of this. They literally said we'll be at the forefront of this AI revolution. No, you're not. No. Our energy prices are 4 times that of America. I mean,
we will be the most advanced cavemen on Earth because we will be living in the caves.
And we'll be eating less meat unless we can just
everybody else,
catch the
Chinese and the Indians and the Japanese, they'll be going to space. They'll be powering their societies without any dirty fuel or anything like that, and we'll be sat there going, "Wow,
this is great.
Rub another stick together. We might have a fire tonight." Not a big one though. Not a big one.
But at least we'll be having community cohesion, because that's the only thing that matters right now. We're going to talk more about the Henry Novak case. Lots of other big stories, of course, coming up. Do stay tuned and give us a call. I want to hear from you. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch.
Talk News Update. Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome back to the show. It's fast approaching 3 minutes past 11 o'clock. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, I really appreciate you joining me. If you've missed anything from the show, do go to my YouTube page. It's the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Easy to find. Hit subscribe, and you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, of course, we are going to be talking more about Henry Novak's horrific murder and the treatment by the police. Calls for the police to, well, basically completely change their conduct, their culture, their attitudes when it comes to policing what they perceive to be race crimes. But also we've had those protests in Southampton starting outside the police station. We've spoken to someone who actually was one of the peaceful protesters, later turning violent. 2 arrests last night. Police being very clear, there will be more arrests. 11 police and a police dog injured, being condemned by ministers, including by Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary. But we've also got Sir Keir Starmer yesterday saying there were serious questions for police after that footage of Henry Novak being handcuffed and being told, "I don't think you have, mate," as he lay bleeding to death from his stab wounds. We're also going to be talking about the latest in the Iran conflict as well. Joining me today, delighted to say for the whole show, is Benedict Spence, Conservative commentator. Morning to you.
Good morning.
Once again.
Oh, I forgot to say, happy Traveller Pride Month or Gypsy History Month or whatever it is.
Is it? Yeah, well, it's Pride Month.
That's what it is, isn't it?
Pride Month, and then also the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, in his newly, have you seen his newly shaven bumps?
Yeah, it's got a new
after
look.
going on his Hajj pilgrimage. He wished us all a happy Traveller Month. I mean, genuinely, as I posted, please, for the love of God, make it stop.
Yeah.
You know, and then
felt the need to tell us about this, but not the tube strike or, you know, anything else that's happening. Just curious choice.
I just think you're digressing.
Ever so slightly, but I thought it was worth mentioning that he hasn't said very much about anything that's going on.
He hasn't said very much. He'll probably say it's something that's happened to Southampton that's not such an issue for a London mayor. However, he has a view on Gaza. Yeah. He has a view on absolutely anything and everything that happens to be a cause that he pretends to or does care about. But there we are. I want to reiterate what I was talking about at the start of the show in terms of what has happened in the last few days. On Monday, we had the sentencing of Vikram Digwa for the murder of Henry Novak. He is the only person who's responsible for the death of that 18-year-old student on the night out. He's the man who plunged the knife in 5 times, once into his chest, causing him to bleed out 2 pints of blood into his lungs. But as much as we're horrified by that, and that man is now behind bars for life with a 21-year minimum sentence, that may well be made longer after an appeal to the Court of Appeal over leniency. But actually, I think for most of it, it's been the horror at the reactions of the police officers to the sight of Henry Novak bleeding to death, telling them again and again, "I've been stabbed," again and again, "I cannot breathe." "I don't think you have, mate," was a response to him saying he was bleeding, even though his mouth was full of blood. Now, Henry Novak's father, Mark Novak, he said on the steps of the court after the sentencing of his son's murderer, he said, "We do not want his death to be used to create further division, hatred or tension. We want his story to help make our streets safer for everyone." Since then, everyone and anyone has been accused of stoking that division, hatred or tension. And it's non-stop. Criticisms of Nigel Farage for saying we need to have white rage about, not hot rage about this. The Tories backbiting, infighting between them. Criticisms of the police. Now we're accused of being, horrible about the police. People wrongly identifying an officer not even remotely involved in this case. His name, his image, his home address put online. Him having to take his family and move elsewhere for his own safety. That's an outrage. Even the real identity of any of the real officers, that we cannot have that going on where people are living in fear of their lives. No one who is but a violent protest, throwing stuff at police or shouting abuse, no one who is threatening any of the officers involved or not involved is doing one bit of good in terms of actually making sure that Henry Novak's story makes our streets safer for everyone, what his family said they wanted. But it is not people speaking out about this. This is not people correctly identifying the problem who are creating that division. That is what we should be doing. It's what our politicians should be doing. It is what the media should be doing. It's what ordinary voters should be doing. And yes, and it's what ordinary police officers should be doing as well. Because we have a problem. We have a problem where the treatment of Henry Novak was not a glitch in the system. It was the system. It was a direct, predictable product of a system where you have written into official policy guidance by the police nationally from the National Police Chiefs Council stating that their goal is to produce equality of policing outcomes, and that this, in their words, does not mean treating everyone the same or being colourblind. That's their words. Anti-racism is their #1 priority, they say. That's an obsession with race. That's an obsession with treating people according to their race as opposed to being colourblind. That is what has created our two-tier Britain. That is what has created two-tier justice. That is what has created two-tier policing. And people are right to talk out about that, because this is not an isolated incident, a one-off that is being exploited by the far right. This is people seeing a pattern and knowing that something is going horribly, horribly wrong. Whether you're talking about the failure to tackle the child grooming gangs and the mass rape of working class girls by Pakistani Muslim men, and no one doing anything, and anyone speaking up being accused of being a racist, because we must worry about community cohesion. Southport riots, the treatment of those people, but not the arresting or anything of machete-wielding Muslim gangs on the very same night. The Hare Hills riot, ethnic minorities. Therefore, the police retreated and did not act. The policing of the pro-Palestinian marches versus the policing of the Unite the Kingdom marches. So different. We can see it before our eyes. Every terror attack, we're told, don't look back in anger. When a security guard at the Manchester Arena doesn't want to approach a man of Middle Eastern appearance with a big rucksack at a concert, basically for teenage girls, because he worries he's going to be called a racist, and then 22 people die and 1,000 plus are injured. When a head teacher raises concerns about an very dangerous young black man, Axel Mudikabana, and says he's high risk and he's attacked goodness knows how many other people and caught with knives again and again. But she's accused of racially stereotyping him. That's before he goes on and kills 3 young girls and wounds 10 other people. When the Nottingham killer, Valdo Callaghan, is released from mental health unit because, well, basically, there's an overrepresentation of young black men in mental health detentions. He went on to kill 3 people and injure seriously 3 others. And then you end up with an 18-year-old who's been stabbed and who is lying in gravel. And he is read his rights and handcuffed by a police officer who he's begging for help, telling him that he's been stabbed. And he's told, I don't think you have, mate. This is why people are speaking out. Speaking out about this is not stoking division. It's not stoking hate. It's not stoking tension. The pendulum has swung far too far since the Macpherson report said we had institutionalised racism in our police force after the murder of Stephen Lawrence in 1993. It was definitely a problem before then. It has swung way too far in the other direction. We've now got a police force that is openly policy-led, in its own writings, in its own documents, racist against white people, holding them to a higher account and treating them differently. This cannot be allowed to continue. It is the police policies, it's the police culture that has done that. And if we want to live in a truly fair and equal society, then our police must act without fear or favour. They must not be remotely concerned with the colour of our skin when they come to either arrest us or come to help us as we lie bleeding to death. That is how you end division, that's how you end the hate, and that's how you end the tension. Benedict Spence, so much has gone on in the last few days. This feels like a very fast-moving story, but the one thing I think that won't be fast-moving is any change in the culture of the police, and that's the one thing that really does need to happen.
The culture of the police, and a lot of that comes top-down from the authorities that they answer to. I just need to correct you very quickly. A cold was the word that Nigel Farage used. Cold. And yeah, we all know what you mean, but it's important to say it. But some people might think that I was being a little bit flippant with my comment about Sadiq Khan earlier, but actually it perfectly encapsulates the attitude. At the height of this scandal, and it is a dreadful scandal, it was more important for Sadiq Khan to praise a minority community who, let's be very clear, are responsible for a
contribution of travellers and gypsies.
This is a community that everybody understands, especially those who live near them, are responsible for a disproportionate amount of crime, but are in many ways shielded from the consequences of that because of their protected characteristics. In the same way, Vikram Digwa, he did not stab Henry Nowak with the kerpound that most Sikhs carry, but he felt emboldened enough to go around carrying large knives because he knew nobody would ever challenge him because of his protected characteristics. And this is my point. Even now, at the height of this scandal, authorities from whom the police take their cues still see the carve-outs, the communities with whom they have their relations with community leaders and so forth. In our multicultural society, they think keeping store with these people is paramount, rather than reassuring the general public that there is no two-tier thing. Because, as you say, we all see that there is now. Those examples that I've just given you are very good ones. You've given others. Everybody knows now the cat is out of the bag, and it doesn't matter how many times politicians or the police come out and say, no, don't look behind the curtain, it's not really happening. We all see that it's happening, and we see what it is those people prioritise, and it's not ordinary people.
And there's the thing, some people have asked the question, does anyone feel sorry for those police officers? I mean, no, one of them has resigned. They're being treated as witnesses, not actually, there come lots of calls for them to face prosecution. To a certain, I mean, OK, they did not do their basic duty. We've spoken to enough police officers saying, of course, you don't accept the word of the guy who says he's been assaulted and racially abused. Someone says they're bleeding and they're clearly not, they're lying on the floor. There's no other explanation for them to be in the state they're in. Clearly you check. They didn't do their job, full stop. But the reason why they didn't do their job was, again, the fear of sort of being perceived as not believing the man of colour telling them that he hadn't been stabbed. And that's what it comes down to. And those assumptions. And this is the issue we've got, which is that actually I do find myself having a tiny scintilla of pity for these police officers, simply because they're doing what they've been trained to do. Well, OK, they failed to do, obviously, to help Henry Nowak. I get that. But in terms of their attitudes, it's what they've been told they must do and how they must behave and how they must think. They have been brainwashed. And you know, our children are being brainwashed from an early age in schools about this stuff. Young people online, certainly at university, they're being indoctrinated with this stuff. That's why they believe it. The top echelons have to believe it or pretend they believe it, otherwise you don't get to the top of the class. Our HR department's absolutely imbued with this from top to bottom. You don't get a job in HR unless you play along with this stuff. I don't know who's worse, the people who believe it or the people who just play along for the sake of a decent job. But we have a very, very, very big problem here, because this isn't just in the police force. It's not one or two officers. Officer after officer is telling us this is an issue. This is plaguing us. But the key thing is, you know, you can say, oh, I'm not that bothered, a local council does this or who does this. The police have powers over us of freedom and being taken away in handcuffs, of life or death in some circumstances, and knowing that they will treat us all equally at that moment when we are the victim of a crime or the perpetrator of a crime, or that we need to know that we are all equal to them, and we are clearly not right now.
Yes, I think it's a fair thing to say that in many instances we are asking police officers and police forces to do silly things that they shouldn't have to do to the detriment of things that we all expect them to do. So they don't turn up to burglaries, they don't turn up to all sorts of things. They give you a crime number or something and then you never hear from them again. But, of course, we all know the stories about policing tweets, about things like that, about clamping down on free speech, because those are what they are being told are effectively the priorities. Now, that an ordinary copper can't do anything about that, because that is his job. And if he doesn't fulfil his job, actually he's right to be worried, because, as you say, the higher-ups who believe this stuff will punish him. That'll be the limit on his career. And I think we also see, actually, in this case, the very fact that, you know, the Digwa family afterwards were still shouting racism for as much as they can.
And then issued an apology, a sorry statement to Henry Nowak's family, which I think most of us just went, you know,
we all
frankly,
understand that it's a lie.
do one.
And this is
you
the
are
thing.
busy hiding the weapon, telling lies to the police, shouting racist after the sentencing of your murderous son.
But this is why, ultimately, the problem with reform and rooting out this ideology is not going to be easy. And the quickest way way to do it is probably to raise the institution and start from scratch.
Yeah.
Now, this might sound like it's one of those things that a lot of people, Times columnists will go, oh, what a ridiculous thing to say. You can't possibly, tear down institutions that have lasted since Robert Peel. Of course you can. You must, in many instances, rip them down and start again. That's what, Germany had to do it, and it's able to function perfectly fine after ripping down institutions.
Fit for purpose.
Yeah, they aren't.
And they are out of control. We know this. The non-crime hate instance, we had 2 Home Secretaries of the Tories who tried to get rid of these non-crime hate incidents, a complete creation of the College of Policing. Since when the College of Policing? Your job is to actually enforce the law that's been made by our elected representatives, elected by us, not to just make up stuff and dealing with by definition non-crime. 2 Home Secretaries failed to get this changed over about a 10-year period. That is very telling. They are a law unto themselves, the police force.
Although I would also say it says a lot about, frankly, the weakness of successive governments.
Yes.
Parliament is sovereign. The government has the power to change all kinds of laws if it has a majority. In theory, it should be able to do these things. It has the power to do these things. There has not been a government that has the gumption to do it, often because, frankly, it sounds a lot like hard work. They don't want that fight, especially in the case, I think, of the Conservatives, who, even if they ideologically didn't always go along with stuff, just thought, it's the direction of travel, why kick up a fuss? It'll make my life more difficult. You're obviously never going to get that reform with Labour.
Yeah.
And what is required, I'm afraid, is not a government that says, well, we can change things from the inside. It will, in some cases, require that. In others, it will mean a difficult scenario where you go, the police, we don't have time to restart the police and reformat it. We need a police that works now, build a new one, and then start delegating powers over to it. Start from scratch.
Well, look, this is a government. I mean, under this government, what was it a year ago? The then Health Secretary West Streeting announced basically abolishing NHS England. They're still in existence, and they've been hiring tens of thousands of staff, and we're paying millions for them. I mean, it's utterly bizarre. If you can't even abolish NHS England, which is basically just another layer of bureaucracy, how the hell are you going to reform the police? I want to hear from you. Politicians and protesters are accused of exploiting Henry Novak's murder to stir up division and violence, basically against the wishes of his family, expressly said by his father. What is your reaction to that? Are people exploiting it, or are people saying what needs to be said? And is it, although, this is about one young man's horrific death and the callousness he was treated with by the police, but actually, it's about your child and my child and our nephews and cousins. This is about this happening to any of us. Because we've got the wrong coloured skin. And it doesn't matter whether your wrong coloured skin is black or white or brown or anything else. Surely that should never be a factor. What is your reaction? What are your thoughts? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged the national rate and text cost £1. Standard network rate message. Let's talk more about these protests last night. We spoke to a caller earlier in the show, didn't we, Benedict, who he was out for the protests outside Southampton police station, the peaceful protest. Now, there was a protest organised by Tommy Robinson and others. Lots of people turned up. An awful lot of people hoping to get a load of clicks on their social media feeds going, I've got my feed going. A lot of baiting of the police. There's a lot of take the knee, take the knee. Understandable, I felt, given what had happened during the Black Lives Matter protests in 2020 when some police officers did. And by the way, as someone who went on anti-lockdown protest, we were all treated very differently than the BLM protesters. Somehow, rule of 6 and all of that and staying at home didn't count. Because what they cared about really mattered. A murder of a man by a police officer 4,000 miles away mattered far more than, what happened with Henry Novak just in December. But the police say there have been 2 arrests. There will be more. 11 officers, 1 dog injured in the protest last night. I'm surprised so little given the state of some of the videos I've seen. Police say people clearly arrived intent on causing disorder and trouble. Not everyone. I'm sure the vast majority of people who went to the police station were there, like our caller, just simply for peaceful protest, to make their voices known, shouting, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. Again, perfectly understandable, not stoking division, the right thing to do in the wake of George Floyd's murder, but apparently stoking division, divisive and unnecessary and exploitative if you're doing it in this case. The left can't have it both ways, can they, Benedict?
Of course they can. They can always have it both ways. That's
the
world in which
what a stupid thing to say.
They don't live in reality. They can do whatever they want, and they think it's morally right. The one thing that I should say about the protest last night is a lot of people who attended them are going to be getting a knock on the door, or possibly not even a knock on the door in the next couple of days, and they probably actually have a lot of the people there live streaming it to thank for that. The police won't even have to have done any surveillance themselves, because there were a lot of independent journalists who have probably potentially incriminated
I
a lot of
imagine,
people,
like the
possibly
Southport
even
riots,
themselves.
I think, imagine like the Southport riots, the vast majority of people who were arrested for violence, obviously not writing a hurty tweet, were people who had long strings of criminal records, including a lot of the teenagers. They were
looking
people
for
who
trouble.
they are people who arrive looking for trouble, not ordinary people who are genuinely concerned about unfair policing.
But what I would just say is, whilst I understand the need for coverage of these things, coverage is very important. Transparency is important. Be aware. Especially if you are a sort of an independent citizen journalist, amateur with a phone, whatever it is, you do stand a very good chance of potentially incriminating people that are stood around you because you're there with your phone showing the whole world who's there.
I want people who commit crimes to be incriminated.
No, I think but this is the point, which is that actually this is not going to be an isolated incident because the direction of travel, another example was Southport. And here is the issue, which is that police respond in force to these sorts of things. But why it is that people often feel the need to be quite aggressive on these sorts of things is that they have seen from other things that the police often back down. The Hare Hills riot, of course, which happened just before the riot after Southport, where the police basically went, ho, we don't want anything to do with this.
They literally physically retreated.
Yeah, and that is, I'm afraid, when I say that in a multicultural society, very often things are underpinned by the threat of violence, this is what we mean. If the police are basically going around saying, listen, there are certain communities and groups that are given special treatment and that we're not going to go in heavy-handed on, then you're saying to those groups, you can throw your weight around, and you're also then saying to the majority groups who don't get that special treatment, the only way you can throw your weight around is to behave like thugs. That is the bad message, but it is the uniform message of truly multicultural societies.
I fear you are right. It's very depressing, but I do fear you are right.
That I'm right. Every now and then.
It does happen. It does happen. I tell you what I thought was particularly unedifying was Nigel Farage attacking Kemi Badenoch, and we've got this by-election coming up in Makerfield and things. We've got fierce battles over what she said, and she was being blatantly misquoted in one. I'm not holding a candle for anyone in particular. I'm non-party political on this. I have my views on different parties and different policies and different people. But, I completely agreed with every word that Nigel Farage said in his video message yesterday morning. We played some of it yesterday. But I also agree with what Kemi Badenoch has been saying. It shouldn't be about Black Lives Matter or White Lives Matter. It's about all lives matter. And it's about taking the black issue out of the white issue out of it. And to a certain extent, she was one of the people in the last government speaking out about this. And again, there is that thing where, to a certain extent, she can get a free pass because of the colour of her skin. So she can say things without being worried about being called racist, although she will get those awful the opposite racism from the left, with being called a coconut and all of those things, and Oreo and things like that. Again, blatant racism for which no one ever seems to get prosecuted. Because if you're saying that all black people have to have certain views because of the colour of their skin, that makes you a racist last time I looked. But again, I don't think that those two infighting, I don't think that helps anyone, I have to say. I do want to just bring in two other stories very quickly. One, in breaking news in the last few moments, Donald Trump has just told, I think, a cabinet meeting actually it would be a bit early in the morning for it, but some sort of meeting this morning, that Iran has agreed that they will not develop a nuclear weapon. Now, who knows when Donald Trump either tweets things or says things if this is the case, because we have seen, haven't we, new strikes between the US and Iran overnight as ceasefire negotiations have stalled. And actually, interestingly, whenever there is more missile strikes, we do tend to see some progress at that point. Do you think it's likely that Iran would have agreed to do that? And if so, does Iran agreeing to anything mean anything? Is it worth a piece of paper anything ever gets printed on?
Well, that's the thing. We don't actually ever really seem to know who it is that's in charge of the Iranian regime right now. And actually, it is entirely possible that a more pragmatic wing of the IRGC has taken power and does recognise the foolishness of continuing to press home this particular agenda, because as long as they continue to do so, the threat of Israel striking them and drawing the US back in is always going to be there. That's ultimately what this is about. Now, can you trust the Iranians to keep their word? No, obviously not. But that's not to say that in the short term they don't genuinely intend maybe to stop that process. Because as much as this hasn't been great for the Western world, the Americans are not achieving diplomatically what they want to, Actually, Iran has taken a pounding. Militarily especially, it has taken an absolute beating. Financially, it is already in a very difficult position. And the thing is, we simply don't have full access to the country. We don't know exactly what's going on. So anybody's guess actually how much pressure the regime is under. It's possible that they have agreed to it. I wouldn't trust it, but I wouldn't rule it out either.
OK, just finally also Andy Burnham, who obviously wants to be the next Prime Minister if he can win the Bakerfield by-election. I'll read out the names of all the candidates a little bit later, I promise you. But he's basically said there was a lot of talk over the weekend that he was going to call a snap election if he got elected. I mean, there's a lot of ifs. You know, if he wins the by-election, if he gets into Westminster, if he wins the job of the leadership of the Labour Party, if all of that, would he call a snap election? I've always thought that was an insane thing for anyone to do with a majority of 400, even with recalcitrant backbenchers constantly stopping him doing anything, as we've seen with Keir Starmer. But he's now said he has ruled that out. But I mean, a lot of MPs would have been going, hold on a minute, we don't want a general election. We've got £99,000 salaries with our nice expenses. We don't want to risk losing our jobs to Reform or the Greens, particularly.
That's why I still wouldn't rule it out. Just because he said it now, whilst he needs the party on side to become leader, he needs them all on side. He needs as many people on side as possible. But ultimately, what are the options if he doesn't call one? It's a slow bleed for the next 2.5 years, and then in that 6 months into the election campaign, he will take a battering.
I think you'll find a lot of people on the left seem to think that Andy Burnham is the sort of the messiah walking on water. There'll be a bounce.
I do think that he understands the precariousness of the situation he's in. I think actually a lot of people would give him credit for calling a general election and drawing a line under Keir Starmer and go, that was that disaster,
but also,
this is me.
He gets to then drop a lot of those manifesto
Exactly, he gets to drop the manifesto issues, and he possibly gets rid of a lot of very pesky backbenchers, and other ones who stick around, if he gets a small majority, are then terrified because they know there's no messing about this time.
Very
That's
interesting.
my view.
Love to hear your thoughts on that. Your thoughts also, of course, coming up next. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000 on Henry Novak and all the aftermath of that, particularly these claims that, you know, whether it's politicians or protesters, violent or otherwise, basically exploiting Henry Novak's death for their own means against the wishes of the family. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:30 is the time. We've been yapping too much, as always. Me, mostly. And we're rather late to your calls, but Philip Kisley is coming up in a few moments. We're going to talk to him. Please stay on the line, Philip. First up, though, let's talk to Kevin in Basingstoke to have his say. What do you want to tell us, Kevin?
Yeah, hi, Julia. I'm nervous, so hopefully you won't talk over me, but I'm absolutely fuming with Nigel Farage. I mean, how dare he? If you're black or brown, you're much more likely per capita to be stopped by the police, being tasered by the police. More violence will be sort of like you'll be treated in a more violent way. You're more likely to die in custody. I mean, the poor family that's just lost their son specifically said, do not use this to stir up trouble. We do not want it to divide people or any violence to come out of it. And then he had the cheek to say, I'm going to make a statement in front of the nation. Who does he think he is?
He's the leader of a political party that's the highest in the polls.
And, yeah, but they don't make political statements in front of the nation. That's down to the king or the prime minister, not him.
No, wait a minute. No, he put out a video. Some broadcasters took it live.
Yeah,
he
what
put
did
out.
he put out
He's an elected politician.
He's in hiding.
What?
He's in hiding. That's why. Because I knew that he would put out a video. He didn't do it in front of the journalists because he doesn't want to be questioned over the £5 million.
He does. He's been questioned plenty of times over the £5 million, and we question every reform.
For about 2 weeks.
Well, it's because it's been referred. There's now an investigation into it. But I mean, there are other things to talk about. If I had Nigel Farage on the show, I would ask him about it, but it wouldn't be the first thing because I think there are more important things to talk about. And I'm mad as hell about him taking that £5 million and not declaring it.
What about all the other things I've just said? Why didn't you pick up on those?
Well, yeah,
you're more likely to be tasered or stripped.
Kevin, there are very, very, very good reasons why more young black men in particular are stopped by the police, are searched, and one of the main reasons that is the vast majority, and these stats are very clear, they're publicly available, the vast majority of black people in this country live in inner cities. The vast amount of stop and search that happens is in inner cities. There is a huge discrepancy in terms of the number of people per capita who are black, who carry out violent street crime, in particular, much higher than for other racial groups, which is why there's more stop and search of young black youths.
Straight away.
What?
That's misleading straight away.
No, it's not.
They don't.
No, it's
you
not.
get me finished. You're talking over me.
You asked me to answer that point. I'm answering that point, and you then interrupted me. Why do you say that's unfair?
Well, because they don't commit those crimes because they're black, do they? They do.
Of course they don't.
No, it's nothing to do with their blackness. It's because they're poor or the area.
They're poor. Oh, so being poor means you can commit a mugging, does it? How insulting to black people.
No, it's not insulting to black people. What about somewhere like Glasgow, where there's a very low number of black and brown people? They still have pockets of places where crime is committed proportionally higher. It's not because of the colour of their skin.
No, it's not. No, it's not because of the colour of their skin. It is a simple fact that in the areas, particularly in London,
where Farage always wants to bring.
But again, so you're telling me off for interrupting you. You asked me a question.
Yeah, but I only get 3 minutes. You get 3 hours.
I mean, yeah, get your own show then. But don't ask me a question and then tell me off for answering it.
You're going to set one up for me, have I?
Kevin, you're saying, look, no one is committing crime because of the colour of their skin. However, it is a simple... I didn't claim that. You seem to be claiming it. The only reason not the only reason, that there will be racism in the police. Absolutely, there is racism in all societies, from all different ethnicities, by the way, towards different ethnicities. However, it is a simple matter of fact that certain crimes are more likely to be to be committed by certain particular groups in society. A lot of that is down to demographics, where people live, where stop and searches are carried out. But that doesn't mean that stat on its own is evidence of racism by the police. I'm sorry, it just doesn't mean that.
Well, it does mean that. If you look at information per capita, they're more likely to die in police custody or be treated in a violent way or tasered. It does prove that.
What are the actions of the people who are being tackled by the police that mean that the police seem to feel the need to get the tasers out? That's another issue. There'll be drug issues. One of the issues is a lot of the comparisons that are being made between white and black populations is a population. So you're looking at a largely urban population where there are higher crime rates among everybody, comparing it with the nation's population, which is 85-90% white, where you're comparing a white person living in a hamlet, a little village in Devon, with someone who's living in Tottenham or East London. Those are not the same population, so you're going to see that discrepancy because the vast majority of black people in this country live in inner cities.
Why did Nigel have to bring...
I can barely hear you. Say again, Kevin.
Why did Nigel Farage say the pendulum has switched, where white British people are more likely to be treated in a negative way when it's absolutely not true? Why does he have to bring
Why did he say that? Because the actual policies of police forces is to treat people of different ethnicities different and to give, basically, preferential treatment to ethnic minorities.
He never makes the situation better. He always makes it worse. He did it after Southport. He's done it again today, yesterday. Even though the parents said, do not do this, he still went ahead and did it.
But why do you think he's making things worse by stating A, his opinion, and
Because
B,
he's going against
facts?
He's going against the parents' wishes. If that was my son and he did that,
the parents don't get to decide what everyone else says.
How dare he do that?
The parents don't get to tell me what to say. They don't get to tell you what to say. They don't get to tell Nigel Farage what to say. This is a free country. I expect our elected politicians to speak out about major issues like this. I think it would be outrageous if they didn't speak out.
Oh, what? So if your child died, if my child died or anybody else's child was stabbed, and they specifically said, do not do what he did, you'd be okay with it?
I don't think that I'm in this circumstance. I don't think that's relevant to that. He's not stoking division. The division already exists. The division already exists. That's the reason why those police officers didn't believe a young white man they thought was a racist and a drunk had actually been stabbed. That division already exists.
That boy's grave. That's what he's done. No,
this is about preventing another boy, preventing someone else's son having exactly the same thing.
Hatred and division, like he always does. That's his career. That's how he makes his living.
Kevin, I think that if Nigel Farage said, I prefer strawberry ice cream to pistachio ice cream, you would think that was true. I think you hate everything he says.
What's the thing to say, Julia? How can you bring it down to something simple like that?
I think that's how you feel about him.
Ice cream. You want to talk about ice cream, do you? We're talking about a boy that's just died, and you want to talk about ice cream.
Again, you're just trying to, for want of a better expression, churn it up, aren't you? At that point, Kevin, you don't agree with anything Nigel says. You don't like the guy. You don't have to.
I do agree with some things he says.
He's an elected.
How do you know it? I don't.
Then I take that. I apologise for that. I'm wrong. What do you agree with that he says?
I don't know. I can't think of something offhand.
Funny that. So I wasn't that far off the mark. I don't think that we have the right, whether we have lost a child or not, and I don't think that was what Mark Novak was doing either. I don't think that. I think the left is completely misinterpreting this. I don't think they have got the right to tell elected politicians or ordinary voters like me or anyone else or you what we can and can't say about an issue of public importance, which is how our police behave when a young lad is dying, bleeding out after being stabbed.
They asked for respect for their son.
Who hasn't respected their son?
They were saying, please do not do this.
No, they didn't say don't speak.
And they didn't
say don't speak about it.
Especially the day after. I mean, he didn't even have the decency to wait a little while.
What's the correct time? Henry Novak died in December. How much longer do we wait to talk about it?
It just came out in the news the day. It wasn't...
No, it hadn't just come out in the news. Kevin, I'm so sorry you don't pay attention to news. Henry Novak died in December. There's been a court case. He'd been convicted on the Friday, and on the Monday, the killer was sentenced. And that was the appropriate time when the family spoke, and also the next morning, after that body cam footage came out, when we had some insight into actually what really happened that night in terms of the police behaviour, that Nigel Farage spoke out, and every other politician spoke out as well, as they have a right to do in a free country.
It was when his dad stood up and said, please do not do it.
You keep saying... He didn't tell him not to speak. You are...
He said, do not stir up trouble. Do not...
He didn't stir up hatred. He didn't stir up division.
He did.
No, it already exists because of the policing.
He did, Julia.
Sorry, Kevin. You think that everyone looked at that video and everyone went, yeah, fine. Absolutely. I watched that video on Monday night. I couldn't get to sleep because I was so haunted and horrified by it. And everyone else has said the same. And you think that morning everyone went, yeah, I'll just head off to work, head off to do whatever I want to do. I'll forget about it.
No, they didn't do that, Julia. No, they didn't.
They wanted people to talk about it. And they wanted people to address it.
Is go against the father's wishes and make statements that cause trouble.
It's not. It doesn't. How does telling the truth cause trouble?
Well, was there trouble after he made the speech?
You think there wasn't going to be trouble anyway? You think Nigel Farage forced people to throw stuff at the police?
Well, he didn't do what the father said, and he didn't try to make the situation better.
How could he have made the situation better?
People being angry. We had the right to be angry.
We do have the right to be angry. Are you not angry about this?
I am angry about this, yes, but I'm angry.
Oh, well, is that because Nigel told you could be?
Well, I'm angry with Nigel Farage, and I would absolutely hate for him to be our Prime Minister.
Kevin, and that is your right. Kevin, if you're more angry, as it sounds like you are, with an elected politician, whether you agree with him or not, speaking his view on this and expressing the views of millions of Britons in this country, than you are at either Vikram Digwa, the man who stabbed Henry Novak to death and caused all this pain in the first place, or the police officers who, when they were told by a man bleeding out, who'd saying, I can't breathe and I've been stabbed, I don't think you are, mate. I think you need to take a long, hard look in the mirror. And as you said, it's my show. I get full 3 hours. Time is up. 11:42 is the time. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, this is Talk, the home of common sense. That call went on rather longer than I'd expected. Let's go straight to Philip Kisley. He's a senior fellow at the New Culture Forum and joins us now. Good morning to you, Philip. I'm so sorry we're so late getting to you. I think you can understand I wanted to take on that call properly. But I suppose I'll just leave it to you. Tell me where you are in terms of this whole case, the criticisms of Nigel Farage, of the protesters and everything. Where do you stand on all of this?
All right, well, let's just take that thing first, the criticism of Nigel Farage politicising this. He is not politicising it. It was politicised already. I think you've made a similar point, actually, to that ridiculous caller. It was politicised by anti-racism. It was politicised by diversity and inclusion. It was politicised by the obsession with reparations. All of these things, these ideologies, these initiatives actually produced the handcuffs. They robbed the officers of their humanity, and they have stripped our institutions of their core purpose. I think that's the problem, and I think that's what happens when the institutions become captured. Now, you either want to do something about it or you don't, and it depends what your priorities are. If you don't want any more young boys to die, if you don't want the police to practice overt racism, if you don't want murderers to get away with it because they cry racism, then you have to do something about it, stand up and have the conversation. And our leaders need to do precisely that, just as you and I do as political commentators. But the point is this: what do you hate most? Do you hate Nigel Farage more than you hate young boys being murdered? And I just listened to that conversation there, like with agog, because clearly that caller hated Nigel Farage above anybody else.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, isn't it? And it is amazing. So many people on the left saying, no, don't politicise this, don't try to exploit this. I mean, sorry, did they see themselves in 2020? I mean, Keir Starmer and Tremaine taking the knee, and I put out an image yesterday saying everyone needs to take a long, hard look in the mirror, because loads of politicians taking the knee in Parliament. I mean, it was appalling. It was repulsive. Talking about changing our policing. And again, the official police documents that say their top priority is anti-racism. No, your top priority is preventing
villains.
preventing crime and catching criminals. That is no longer the top priority, and it shows in those crime stats, and it shows in the number of arrests and convictions, does it not? But it's amazing how often the left accuses the right. That's what's going on here, of something which they themselves do every day of the week.
Yeah, I think that there's the classic thing that's going on. Something appalling happens, and then what we always get is this inversion of reality. It's the people who are upset about it, the people who want to do something about it. They are the villains, and no one's mentioning the murderer anymore.
Yeah,
actually,
I keep saying his name deliberately.
Yeah, I noticed. Yes. I noticed that you said his name, and I thought, thank God you've actually mentioned the murderer. Because this is what happens. The perpetrator gets quietly removed, and then we start talking about other things, and reality becomes inverted, because that's how ideology works. But I think there's another point here, Julia, and people haven't really picked up on this that much, but I think it's hugely important. We're talking about DEI here, aren't we? Diversity and inclusion, the big sector. It's a massive part of our economy, and it's a massive employer. All the public sector, all education, all NHS, all big companies and medium-sized companies, Julia, they have all of these people coming in. They have people within the companies, HR, welfare officers, diversity officers, you name it, being paid. We have university degrees that produce these people like a sausage machine, okay? There is a vested interest for so many people to keep this stuff alive. Keep it going, because it pays people's wages.
And very good wages as well. They're often paid a lot more than the people who they, for want of a better expression, police. But you said DEI, and you skirted over the E, and people think it's equality. It's not. It's equity. No, this is massively contained in those police documents in terms of how you treat different ethnic minorities and not being colourblind, and very specifically stating not being colourblind. I mean, National Police Chiefs Council states producing quality of policing outcomes. This does not mean treating everyone the same or being colourblind. And this is equity is different from equality. It's about treating people differently to get the outcome to be the same. But that so again, if too many young black men are being stopped and searched because the stats show that it's young black men in inner cities who are committing a lot of the certain crimes, so you want people to be stopped and searched, the knife crime. And by the way, the victims are usually other young black men, it must be pointed out, and certainly their mothers are busy pointing that out a lot of the time. That you must arrest fewer black men, and you must arrest more white men. That they think is the solution, as opposed to, why don't we just stop all crime, whatever we can, regardless of the colour of the skin of the person perpetrating that crime?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, we live in a fantasy world, don't we? We live in a fantasy world of identity politics, where you've just said equity is the key thing. So just so viewers know, equity means equality of outcome, not equality of opportunity. Now, any sane society works around the idea of equality of opportunity. Now, there will always be inequalities. That's the nature of a free society. But what you do is try to iron out those as much as you can. The minute they become the absolute end of everything, that is the time you destroy your own society.
And that's what's happening right now.
Sensible people just say no.
Just finally, do you think there's any hope that we're told, we're going to look, even the Prime Minister says this needs to be looked at, the policies, and there's lots of talk and pressure on the police to do something about this, given how captured our public institutions are, and as you say, many, big companies as well, and small companies. Do you think there's any hope that we are going to root this, and I would say this poison, and it's a poison, out?
Well, I think the general public are aware of this stuff now. I think the problem in the past is that the people generally weren't aware of the nature of it. People kind of thought, oh, it's identity politics gone mad, it's political correctness. No, it's much more than that. It's ingrained in every single institution in the country. It's central to who we are now. So I think what needs to happen, it's a generational thing. It's a generational push. push to say, look, this is harming us. Anti-racism actually is racism. It's also riddled with things like anti-Semitism as well. So we really need to pick it apart, and there needs to be really in-depth, complex conversations. We need to demonstrate, we need to describe, and we need to understand the impact of this stuff. So by saying, just to come back to the original point, but I come back by saying, well, we shouldn't talk about it because the family doesn't want it to be weaponized. I'm sure they don't, and my heart absolutely goes out to them. But the one thing we must do, Julia, I'm sorry, we must talk about it. That's what we have to do if we're going to make change.
Exactly. That's how we do things in a democratic society. Philip Kisley, great to talk to you. Senior Fellow at the New Culture Forum. Going to take a very quick break. They're going to be talking to David Patrikarakos, Special Correspondent at the Daily Mail, about what Donald Trump has just said about possibility of a deal with Iran. Another possibility is actually going to happen. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. I've been round with callers, which is why I've not got much time with David Patrikarakos, who's a special correspondent at the Daily Mail, to talk about rather interesting international affairs. Good morning to you, David, and thanks for your patience.
No problem, Julia. Always a pleasure.
Thank you, John. Let's get straight to it. With Donald Trump this morning, after we knew that, the US and Iran launched a whole new set of missile strikes against each other, very, very tentative ceasefire. Now he's been saying this morning in Washington that, that the Iranians have agreed to give up having a nuclear weapon. How much can we believe what Donald Trump says, or indeed what the Iranians say?
Well, look, I mean, the issue with this is that Iran has never said it wanted a nuclear weapon, right? We knew they were pursuing one covertly. But the whole point was that they were lying and saying, oh, no, we don't want nuclear weapons. They even claimed that Khamenei, the old Khamenei, the one that's dead, although the new one may be dead as well, had a fatwa against it. So, I mean, Iran has promised to do something that they've always said they weren't going to do in the first place.
Yeah.
I mean, it's more of the same, Julia. You saw the strikes. As I said, you've got to think of these sort of tit-for-tat strikes as actually a form of diplomatic signalling. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I spent decades looking at Iranian diplomatic rhetoric. They work in three registers, Julia. One is endless boasting. Two is complaining about how badly the world has treated them. And three is threatening hellfire. We now have an American president who works in exactly the same diplomatic registers.
I was just thinking, that's Donald Trump.
Yeah, exactly. So everything becomes harder to analyse. I maintain we will get to a deal for the simple reason that everyone needs one.
And everyone wants one. Everyone wants to walk away from this.
Completely. Look, Iran benefits from what I call the despot dividend, okay? Democracies always are at a disadvantage when they fight dictatorships. Iran has cut the internet. We can't hear its people. We can't see the massive damage that was inflicted on it. Conversely, the whole world is having a go at Donald Trump. Yeah. The Iranian economy is in the toilet. Inflation is skyrocketing. Its people are oppressed right now, but they were in open revolt before. The Iranians need this. Oil is the only industry they have, and they're suffering as well. So we'll get there, but it will be painful.
The question is, though, of course, which side, the West or or the Iranians are willing to take the most economic pain. And I fear, alas, the West doesn't. I was very buoyed up, actually, by a poll at the weekend that showed that the majority of Britons in this country were saying they wanted sanctions to continue on Russia over Ukraine, even though their biggest concern was the cost of living. And that, of course, does impact on that. I was quite encouraged by that. Actually, the people understand that sometimes these things have to happen. What do you make of the claims? And we constantly hear this, I mean, loads of this in the media about, well, you know, it's Israel, it's Netanyahu who is stopping a deal happening. And of course, a lot of the Iranian negotiation is about the sort of, well, no, this has got to include the attacks in Lebanon on Hezbollah by the Israelis. But of course, you know, Israel doesn't want to continue the war. Israel just doesn't want to allow Hezbollah to continue in Lebanon because of the threat that it poses. It'd be like us saying, yes, we'll end the war with Hitler and the Nazis, but we'll leave the Nazis in power in Berlin.
Well, absolutely, or even more than that, we'll leave them in power in Ireland, so they can, you know, they can lob rockets at our cities every day and clean them out. So absolutely, look, this idea that the United States of America, least of all Donald Trump, has no agency and is dictated to by a tiny state in the Middle East is fundamentally unserious. Say what you like about Donald Trump, but it is my firm belief that he does pretty much whatever he wants to do, and I think that bears it out. You are right. As someone who's been reporting on the ground from Ukraine since the beginning of the war, which was in 2014, as you know, not in 2022, I've been very impressed by our nation's ability to understand the threat of Russia, to understand the threat of Putin, and to understand that sacrifices are needed. Because make no mistake, as long as we are reliant on rogue states for our energy or our supply chains, as we are discovered with China during COVID, we are at a disadvantage.
Absolutely.
So pain is worth it to wean ourselves off it.
Yeah, well, I just hope that people understand. I think, you know, again, I don't know whether Donald Trump has got about the war the right way in Iran, and certainly the failure to secure the Strait of Hormuz, etc., etc. However, I don't think a lot of people really understand the threat that Iran poses, not just to Israel, but to everybody around the world. I think that's a key thing we need people to wake up to. David, I know it was short, but it was very sweet and very, very informative, as always, with you. David Patrick-Karakos, special correspondent at the Daily Mail. Coming up, we are going to take more of your calls. Of course we will. A lot of you want to have your say on these politicians and protesters accused of exploiting Henry Novak's murder to stir up division and violence against the wishes of the family. What are your thoughts on that? 0344 499 1000. We certainly heard Kevin's about half an hour ago. We're also going to take PMQs live. I have a funny feeling the Henry Novak murder is very much going to be at the forefront of things when we come to the first set of questions from Kemi Badenoch to Keir Starmer. Joining me for that will be Benedict Spence and also Mike Buckley, former Labour Party advisor. Do stay tuned. This is Talk.
You know, you have to remember that Peter Murrell has been the chief executive of the SNP for nigh on a quarter of a century. He's been with Nicola Sturgeon since 2003. She said that she didn't have access to his personal records. They had separate bank accounts. So we can take, well, what you want from all of that. The list that you gave is unbelievable. 124,000 in a camper van, Fortnum and Mason's picnic hampers, a couple of lawnmowers, one for 3,000 quid, 3 dynamic Savile umbrellas, £970. The list goes. A wine coaster. I needed to look up what a wine coaster was. 3,500 quid. So the list goes on.
When you're talking about crimes as vicious as rape, serial murder, really depraved crimes, it's quite clear to me that the usual considerations around whether you should be lenient because of this context, whether or not there should be more room for rehabilitation in that context, just don't apply. From the simple commonsensical basis that if someone is capable of doing that, they're a threat to society.
But this thing,
I don't want to take that risk.
If these kids genuinely, you know, and they are kids, everyone involved is a kid. I mean, it's just an absolute travesty. If they don't know that all of these things are wrong, then by definition, we need them off the street.
So there's now a label for children who skip school. You know, parents can't sort it out. In the old days, I used to think that skipping school was you know, against the law. You know, and parents used to be taken to court. Well, no longer anymore. They found a label now, Ian, which allows them to sit at home. Again, I keep saying, you know, on tablets, wasting their time.
Wow.
You know, universities. Let's get everyone going to university. Well, I think a fundamental job of education is to prepare children for the society they're going to live in a positive way, i.e. prepare them for a job. You've got the welfare state, I've already said, wonderful thing, isn't it? But a safety net, not a way of life.
Henry Novak's last words were, "I can't breathe," as he was handcuffed, having been stabbed not only in the front but in the back as well, you know. Okay, he stabbed him in the chest.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. So good afternoon to you. 2 minutes past midday is the time. Of course, this is Talk with the Home of Common Sense, and I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. In just a couple of moments, we're going to cross live to the House of Commons for Prime Minister's questions. Keir Starmer already on his feet. Will be taking that live when we get the questions from Kemi Badenoch. We know that Nigel Farage, the Reform leader, is also the Commons chairman. He has got a question on that order list. If you do miss anything of the show, you've missed anything, you've missed a rip-roaring first couple of hours, I have to say, go to my YouTube page, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe so you never have to miss the thing. And whether you are listening right now on DB Plus Radio or your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, your connected device, very much appreciate you joining us. Lots more to talk about. Benedict Spence is joining me, still in the studio, Conservative commentator, going to be joined after PMQs as well by Mike Buckley, former Labour Party advisor, to give analysis. I mean, I think we can... There's some obvious expectations. Henry Novak, really the only story in the news right now. You would expect that that would certainly be something that would come up. Of course, 2 days ago, I would have thought it would all be the Mandelson files, Benedict.
Yeah. Well, that's always the thing, isn't it? That, you know, Keir Starmer keeps on having to deal with Mandelson. He reappears. It reminds everybody, that was a silly thing to have done. Your judgment's not very good. Then it disappears. But like
like his
clockwork...
WhatsApp messages.
Yes, but like clockwork, it will come back again. It's not going away. It will continue to haunt him.
An ongoing police investigation by Mandelson again. And that, you know, that links the Prime Minister's decision to bring someone back who had previously had to resign from 2 different jobs in the government for lying. Who knew that a liar lied? I know, it's an absolute mystery. I wouldn't trust Keir Starmer. If he was a woman, I wouldn't trust his judgment in boyfriends. Like, another liar, what a surprise. But in terms of the big story, I mean, there's no doubt he's got the Home Secretary by his side, Shabana Mahmood, that I would be expecting at this point that there was. I don't know if he's making a statement on the Henry Novak case at all. If someone could shout at me from the control room if he is. No, hello, is anyone listening to me in the control room? Yeah, he's not. He's not making a statement about that, but he's certainly on his feet for quite a long time. I would expect that Kemi Badenoch would go. So let's go straight to Kemi Badenoch right now, asking her first question.
There are serious questions to answer, including how accusations of racism informed police thinking. And we're supporting the IOPC to get to the bottom of what happened. But no matter the pain we feel, there is no justification for more violence and disorder. The attacks directed towards police officers in Southampton last night were disgraceful and completely unacceptable. This is a time for serious work, not rage. And let me be clear, we will ensure anyone found engaging in disorder meets the full force of the law, as we have done before. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others, in addition to my duties in this House. I shall have further such meetings later today.
Dr. Rossage.
Thank you. We'll actually come just back out again. We just wanted, that was actually Keir Starmer actually making a fairly lengthy statement before then, paying tribute to various folk. And then, of course, about Henry Novak there. We'll get back in when we get the questions, because, again, often these questions are about very, very different things. And Benedict Spence, I mean, I thought, given that statement, I think we can safely say the questions are going to be related to Henry Novak and policing. But again, we've got politicians like Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch and him have been in a war of words as well over whether people are stoking up tensions and divisions over this death against the wish of the family, we keep being told.
Yeah, but it's not acceptable for the Prime Minister to hide behind a grieving family and say, well, they say don't do this, so please don't do it. You know, this is it's a serious matter of, of public interest, ultimately. This approach to policing is what determines how other potential victims may be treated. Everybody, I think, has a right to opine on this, especially now that the trial's done and it's not prejudicing it.
And of course, again, the key thing about this is not about just the awful death of Henry Novak. It is about a policing policy that contributed to not his death. We know that from the pathologist in the case, that he was going to die of his wounds, sadly. But it is something that it's contributing to the fact that this man was being treated as a perpetrator and not being believed. We think, we don't know for sure, but we believe because of those policies which put woke views on DEI and policing, anti-racism policing, again, which is just racist policing, above the issues of actually being a proper police force doing their job.
Listen, all we can go on is what the footage that we've seen, but the footage that we have seen has been pretty clear-cut. Actually, Henry Nowak, whilst he is dying on the floor, says, "I've been stabbed." The people around him, including his murderer, say, "No, he hasn't." And a police officer goes, "Yeah, I know, but we still have to check him anyway."
And then doesn't check him.
Handcuffs him first. That's the whole thing.
It's lifting up the shirt for just an inch. Again, absolutely. And you just think how different things would have been. And again, even if he had been racist, which he wasn't, there's no doubt at all that the priority then was saving his life and not handcuffing someone who was already lying on the ground, clearly not a risk to anybody.
I mean, honestly, it's just the most horrendous thing that this man, the last thing he heard were his rights being read to him as he died and nobody was believing him.
And being treated as a criminal himself. Oh, look, let's go to the House of Commons because Kemi Badenoch is just about to get onto her feet.
Fairer Britain. Come to Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch.
Mr. Speaker, can I echo the Prime Minister's words on Lance Corporal James Freeman and also about the Royal Navy helicopter crash in Devon? I also want to share my deepest condolences to the family and friends of Henry Nowak. The circumstances around Henry's wrongful arrest and tragic murder must be a wake-up call to the entire country and our institutions that every life matters. And it is the responsibility of everyone in this House to bring people together, not divide them. Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I would also like to take this opportunity to pay tribute to Sir Alan Hazelhurst, Lord Hazelhurst, who died on Monday. Sir Alan served Parliament for over 50 years, 8 of them in the Lords, 40 years as my predecessor as MP for Saffron Walden. And from 1970 to 1974, he was also the Member of Parliament for Middleton and Prestwich. He was respected on all sides of this House, elected multiple times as your predecessor, Deputy Speaker, before he concluded in the other place. Apart from serving his constituents, his greatest passion in Parliament, and perhaps in life, was, as you said, cricket. He was chairman of the all-party parliamentary group for cricket, a role which he encouraged me to take up and which I graciously declined, telling him I knew absolutely nothing about cricket. But I think colleagues should know that the reason Sky Sports can be found on the parliamentary TV network is because of Sir Alan's intense lobbying. There is so much to say, but I think just letting everyone know that he was a good and kind man, and he will be very much missed. My thoughts are with his wife Angela and his children Mark, David and Emma, and his grandchildren. So, Mr. Speaker, can I ask the Prime Minister, by how much has the welfare bill risen since he came to office?
Mr. Speaker, can I just first thank her for her approach and her tone in relation to the Henry Nowak tragic case. In relation to welfare, Mr. Speaker, as she knows, we inherited a broken system from the party opposite, and we are now improving that system. We are now improving that system, delivering a youth guarantee, rolling out 300,000 work experience placements, and commissioned Alan Milburn's review into youth unemployment. They're the steps that we were taken. As she will know, the number on welfare went up hugely on their watch, as did the cost under the Shadow Chancellor.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister doesn't seem to know the answer, so let me tell him. Benefits alone have risen by £20 billion since he came to office. The Prime Minister has promised welfare reforms, we heard him say it just now, so can he tell the House why was there no bill in the King's speech to reform welfare?
Well, Mr. Speaker, welfare reform is balancing universal credit so it no longer pushes people away from work. That's what we're doing. They voted against it. Welfare reform is introducing a right to try to incentivise people to take up opportunities. That's what we're doing. they voted against it. Welfare reform is providing record funding on apprenticeships. That's what we're doing. Apprenticeship starts fell by 40% on their watch. And she talks about the welfare bill. It soared to £88 billion, by £88 billion on their watch. Nearly 3 million people were written off. Face-to-face assessments collapsed because of the contracts they agreed. And the person who signed off those contracts was the Shadow Chancellor.
Mr. Speaker, we need to bring down the benefits bill. He complains about the Shadow Chancellor. The bill went up because of the pandemic. And even then, Mr. Speaker, even then, they were asking us to spend more. It's not the Shadow Chancellor who's the problem, it's the actual Chancellor. She's not even here in her place. It is the actual Chancellor. Mr. Speaker, the reason why there is no welfare bill is because the Prime Minister has given up. And he's given up because they have given up on him. On Sunday, the Welfare Secretary was asked 12 times on national radio if he would make cuts to the benefits bill, and 12 times he could not answer. So I will ask the Prime Minister, is he going to cut the benefits bill?
Mr. Speaker, all the measures we're doing to reform welfare, all the measures we're taking to get young people into work are measures to reduce the cost and the numbers of people who are unemployed. And, Mr. Speaker, that's why we've introduced the youth guarantee, so that young people can have help into work, that they can then, after 18 months, if they haven't got a job, be given a job for 6 months, supported, which we know is the best way to ensure that they succeed as we go forward. That is the change that we're making, Mr. Speaker. But they introduced the system that is broken. We're reforming it. Did they vote to reform it with us? No, they voted to keep the broken system.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister keeps saying he's bringing in welfare reforms. None of those things are going to cut the bill. Even his own Tim's review explicitly says, this is their review, this is in the terms of reference, explicitly says this is not about generating proposals for further savings. He had a chance to cut benefits. Last year, I remember, they were planning to cut benefits, and on the floor of this House, they U-turned. What did he do when he had a chance? He caved. He caved to all these MPs behind him who don't want benefits brought down. That's why they're sitting silently behind him. So does the Prime Minister agree with his Welfare Secretary that that was the moment he lost his authority?
Mr. Speaker, I'm proud of what we're delivering on this side of the House. The fastest growing economy in the G7. They said that couldn't be done. Despite the war in the Middle East, the OECD forecast UK growth is up and inflation is down. Net migration, Mr. Speaker, net migration, which reached nearly 1 million under them, and the Leader of the Opposition was the cheerleader, down by a staggering 82%. The asylum backlog down by 46%. We're delivering the fastest reduction in waiting times in the NHS in the history of the NHS. That's on top of free school meals, free breakfast clubs and free childcare. And, of course, we're lifting 500,000 children out of poverty. I'm very proud of the work of this Labour government.
Mr. Speaker, he says he's proud of what they're delivering. I'm glad to see the Prime Minister still has a sense of humour, given we all know he's losing his job soon. He has no authority, and we know why. His MPs will not let him do anything. The Welfare Secretary said in private what they won't dare say in public. He said, every meeting I have with Labour MPs is about who can we tax in order to pay more benefits. Shameful. Last week, Tony Blair said if the Conservative Party repeats its offer of working together on welfare, Labour should accept. So today, I am repeating that offer to the Prime Minister. Is he ready yet?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, they introduced a system that's broken, and they put the bill through the roof, and now they want to give us advice on welfare. No thanks. No thanks. The question should always be not what benefits people are entitled to, but what help we can give people to change their life. That's what the Work and Pension Secretary was arguing, and he's right about that. And it's a Labour government that's helping people into work. And she asked what we've done. She asked what we've done. More rights for renters, stopping unfair rent strike. That's 11 million people giving greater security and a place to call home. More rights for workers, Mr. Speaker, including bereavement leave on day one. Ask anyone who's lost someone and they'll tell you just how important it is to have bereavement leave and lifting 500,000 children out of poverty. We often say in this House that every child should go as far as their talent or ability will take them. It does not happen if they're growing up in poverty. And the party opposite have fought us every turn. I'm proud of what we're delivering. There's much more to do.
Mr. Speaker, the truth is, unemployment has risen every single month since they came into office. You can listen to their chairs get weaker and thinner with every passing moment. The fact is, despite his huge majority, the Prime Minister doesn't have the votes to reform welfare. There is a solution, a Conservative solution. Benefits bill down. Mr. Speaker, they're all jeering now. I don't know why they're supporting him. He is more than happy to release all their text messages while all of his has disappeared. Disappearing messages from a disappearing PM. There is a Conservative solution. Benefits bill down, taxes down, growth up. Everyone in this House knows that he is just a caretaker, keeping the seat warm for the Mayor of Manchester. But it doesn't matter who's in charge. Labour MPs will keep asking, who can they tax to pay more benefits? It is in their DNA. Isn't it the truth, Mr. Speaker, that the problem isn't this passive Prime Minister, the problem is the Labour Party?
Forgive me if I don't take too much notice of the Leader of the Opposition. For 14 years, they broke our welfare system, lost control of our borders, presided over the biggest fall in living standards on record, broke the economy, prisons, the NHS, I could go on and on. No wonder she and they are totally irrelevant. The change delivered by this Labour government, the biggest upgrade in workers' rights in a generation, delivered. Renters' Rights Act, delivered. Record funding for our NHS, delivered. The fastest growing economy in the G7, delivered. Lifting 500,000 children out of poverty, delivered. We're going to fight even harder for working people, a stronger and a fairer Britain.
Right, well, that was Kemi Badenoch, 6 questions and 6 responses from the Prime Minister. I won't say answers, you rarely get answers. I have to say, well, we were quite wrong, were we not, Benedict Spence, in predicting we thought, Henry Novak, obviously Kemi Badenoch did talk about how his death must be a wake-up call to the country and institutions, every life matters, but then she moved on to welfare. Yeah. But just going back to what the Prime Minister said at the beginning, and we managed to catch most of it, when he was talking at the beginning, he was paying tribute to, obviously we heard a long tribute to the death of Sir Alan Hazelhurst, another senior figure in the Commons, very sadly died. But he said there was no justification for more violence and disorder after what happened in Southampton last night. The Prime Minister condemned the violence and disorder. He said Henry Novak's family have shown extraordinary dignity after their son's life was stolen in appalling circumstances. He was clearly a kind and thoughtful and much-loved young man. This, he says, is a time for serious work, not rage. Benedict Spence, and in a moment we'll talk to Mike Buckley. What's your response to those words?
Well, I think he's completely right to note the dignity of the family, who I think have been incredibly dignified throughout what has been clearly an appalling thing that's happened to them. In terms of him saying that this is a time for hard work, not rage, well, yes, we'd love to see the hard work, but actually serious the reason why, serious work, the reason why there is so much rage is because actually this, at no point in the last decade or so have cases like this, be it the grooming gangs, be it Southport, be it Valdo Calican, it's always lessons will be learned. Yeah. They never are. That's why people are now getting angry, because they sense the only way to get politicians to listen is to potentially push at boundaries. The politicians say, please don't push at those boundaries. Yeah. If that's what they're saying, you understand why they might go, let's try that.
Listening also into that PMQs, and I'm sorry for that, Mike Buckley's former Labour Party advisor, Mike Buckley, that was, look, it was certainly a pretty lacklustre performance, I think, on both sides, Mike. But what did you make in terms of what both the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition had to say in relation to the case of Henry Novak? Hello, Mike, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Mike? Oh, he's very. Well, that's very frustrating. He's frozen. Hopefully, we'll give it a couple of seconds and hope we can get that get his screen unfrozen. Ain't that always just the way? As soon as we get, he's probably desperate to sit and have his say. Let's talk about what the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch, did go on, and this was all about welfare. Very much in the news last week, wasn't it? Over Alan Milburn and his report. And again, I'm just a review. Tell us something we don't already know. Oh yeah, loads of people are unemployed and, frankly, in my view, unemployable.
Yeah.
We talked about that a lot last week. But Kemi Badenoch pointed out the benefits bill has got up to $20 billion since the Prime Minister had come into office. He's got the authority. His MPs won't let him do anything. The problem is the Labour Party was one of our final lines. We've just got Mike Buckley back. Mike, before I go back to... Thank you. I'm so glad we got you back on the line. Mike, just your response to what the Prime Minister and Kemi Badenoch had to say about Henry Novak.
I mean, they were appropriately remorseful of the situation, as they ought to be. But I don't think we learned anything today about the police's action on the night in question, and I don't think we've learned anything about government policy as it relates to the police and to the guidelines that they work under, or indeed to the investigation that's obviously ongoing into what happened.
But then we wouldn't expect
it was a placeholder conversation as much as anything else, I think.
Yeah, of course, and we wouldn't expect it. We know, but again, these things always, I think, in my view, take far, far too long. But it's saying that this is a time for serious work, not rage. Now, Nigel Farage has been under a lot of criticisms for talking about, and I'll be very careful with my words, cold rage. People should have cold rage about this. Now, cold rage is very specific. It's about people thinking in a measured way, not expressing, explosive views or going on the streets or violence or anything like that. Cold rage. Who's right? Is it a time for cold rage or a time to not have rage?
We should all be deeply angry, and I don't necessarily object to the words that were spoken by Nigel Farage, but it feels to me, and I think it would feel to many people, that there's an undercurrent to what he's saying.
Which is what?
And that's simply because of who he is.
Which is
I would imagine that your listeners could fully understand what I'm saying, and I think you probably.
Well, why do you have to be? You don't have to be code. I mean, we're not being overheard by sort of Russian spies. What was the undercurrent of what Nigel Farage was saying?
I don't want to inflame the situation. I don't want to make it worse. I'll rephrase. Lots of people would think that when Nigel Farage says this is a time for cold rage, that he is calling for violence on the streets.
But then that's not an understanding what cold rage means.
He may well not be saying that at all, but I think he should understand that given who he is and his place in society, that he needs to be more careful probably than most with the language that he uses, and he should think long and hard about the language that he uses and make sure that it cannot be misinterpreted. I fully believe that the words that he used could be misinterpreted.
I think the people who are going to commit violence on the streets are going to commit violence on the streets either way.
I agree with that. And I think what he's saying is about political positioning and trying to appeal to base elements, shall we say, in society.
Well, I must be one of those base elements then.
I don't think you are for a moment.
I think I agree with every single word he said.
You are not going to go out on the streets and commit violence.
How do you know? I've got to be honest with you, Mike. I can see a point when I would, actually. And I mean that seriously.
I
remember in 2019 when we had the Parliament again and again betraying the will of a democratic vote, and I was saying I'm going to go and buy a pitchfork. I'm going to be one of the people outside Parliament. I can absolutely see a point when British people would say, "You're not listening to us on key issue after key issue after key issue. You're not doing anything. We've been treated appallingly. We are done with this. If you're not going to listen to us." When we vote and we say our point, peacefully, then we will make you listen to us, because a lot of people feel in this country that certain communities are listened to because of the threat of violence.
I cannot imagine a scenario in which you would take violent action against another human being, a police officer or otherwise. That's what happened the other night.
I don't want anyone to be in that position ever.
No, you don't, and nor do I. That's the context we're in. It's therefore incumbent on all politicians, elected and otherwise, and other people who speak into the public debate, to make sure that we minimise the chance of violence and not exacerbate it. And I think that Nigel's language.
Well, I don't think he was remotely calling for violence. I mean, bearing in mind, we're looking at a media that we've watched scenes of footage in the Black Lives Matter riots where people were literally setting fire to buildings and cars and threatening people, saying largely peaceful protests. I mean, I'm not entirely sure, with all due respect, that the left is in a position to judge these things.
I'm not trying to judge anybody. I am simply saying it's incumbent on all of us, whatever part of the political spectrum we're on, to minimise the chances of violence and not exacerbate those chances.
OK, well, but again, isn't having cold rage, isn't saying we need action and it's got to start now. And we actually, isn't that exactly about preventing future violence? Now, I know that Nigel Farage is got a question. I'm going to come back to both of you. I'm going to go straight to the comments now. Nigel Farage asking a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Following the horrendous circumstances of Henry Novak's death, can I urge the Prime Minister to consider this? It is now clear to growing millions in this country that we're living under two-tier policing. The instructions that are given to police officers from police bosses are clear and written down in ink. It says you must treat different ethnic groups in different ways. That, apart from the upset and the anger at the circumstances of his death, the anger that you saw spilling out in Southampton last night, and which is in danger.
Condemn the violence.
Which is in danger of getting considerably worse. Because if the public lose trust,
Condemn it.
if the public lose trust in being treated fairly by the police, can he take some action, end this divisive practice of two-tier policing, and make sure that all British citizens are treated the same?
Mr. Speaker, I don't believe there's two-tier policing in this country. I'm really shocked that he pretends to have respect for Henry's family and then acts in this way. They are a grieving family.
Mr. Blash, please, it's a very important question. I want to hear the Prime Minister. If you want to carry on, go outside, please, Prime Minister.
The grieving family have asked us not to respond in the way that the Leader of Reform has responded. They've asked us not to. They have lost their son in the most appalling circumstance. They make a simple plea of us as human beings to please not exploit that. That is their plea to us. We all need to reflect on those words of Henry's father. My response, and the response of others, to be fair, has been focused on the lessons to be learned so we can deliver justice. His response has been to appeal for rage. Rage. That's his response to a father who's lost his son and asked for that not to happen. Exploiting this tragedy to create grievance and division would be wrong in any circumstances, but to do it when the family are expressly saying, please don't, is unforgivable. It shows exactly who he is.
Well, that was an extraordinary exchange there between Nigel Farage and Keir Starmer. As you would have heard, Nigel Farage talking about two-tier policing, different ethnic groups being treated in different ways. And he said, we talked about anger spilling out in Southampton. Lots of jeering, cries from people behind him, you should be ashamed of yourself. Lots of calls for him to condemn it. He noticeably didn't. I would say a majorly big error by Nigel Farage there. But he says it's in danger of getting worse. He says end this divisive practice of two-tier policing. Keir Starmer was absolutely clear. He said, I don't believe there is two-tier policing. Now, this is the problem. He genuinely doesn't believe that when the rest of us can see it before our own eyes. Then a lot of talk about his shock. And he says Nigel Farage pretends to have respect for Henry Novak's family, whose family had pleaded his death was not exploited, and he says that Nigel Farage's response was to appeal for rage, and that was the response to a father who had lost his son. He said it was unforgivable, and just exactly the person who he is. I'm going to get Mike Buckley and give you a chance to respond to that. I mean, that was an extraordinary exchange, was it not?
It was an extraordinary exchange, and it was evident that Keir Starmer was prepared for that moment, for that question to come, because he was very clear in what he said about not acting against the wishes of the family, and referring to the statement of Henry's father, and also calling out what we were talking about a minute ago, which is Nigel Farage's call for rage, which Keir Starmer made perfectly clear is again exactly the opposite of what the family is asking for, not wanting the death of their son. instrumentalised.
I would say it wasn't a call for rage. So I wouldn't say it wasn't a call for rage so much as like saying, people should feel rage because that is what people are feeling. Benedict Spence, I thought that was a major error by Nigel Farage to not condemn the violence, even though I know he would have been jeered for it. I mean, he gets jeered just by standing up in Parliament. And again, I don't think MPs realise just how bad that looks when they do that.
Yes, I think that's actually partly why he's not done it. I think he will do it at some point. He has to. I think that he will probably do it in a statement when he's not on camera so that he can say that he has done it. But the point about this is what I think...
Why not do it there and then?
Because I think what he wanted, and I do think he's being provocative here, what he wanted was the sight of the jeering. What he wanted was the sight of MPs, other MPs, saying, oh, you should be doing this, you're this, that and the other, so that he can then turn around and say, look, what they care about is me condemning violence, not answering questions about two-tier policing or Henry Novak. That's what he wanted. So he has been controversial.
He knows what he's doing.
He's been provocative, but I entirely understand why he did it, given he knew full well he would be jeered whatever he said.
Yeah, Mike Buckley, I mean, it's interesting that Keir Starmer's first answer was, I don't believe there is two-tier policing. Now, I know most of my audience's views, certainly of the callers' views on this, what a lot of people do feel is two-tier policing. I think we are seeing it, we witness it week in, week out in terms of different judgments on different policing, marches, grooming gang, you name it. For him to make that statement, do you think that is what Nigel Farage was hoping he would say? Because that is going to cause outrage among many of his supporters.
I suspect probably Nigel Farage did want Keir Starmer to say it, but I'm glad that Keir Starmer said it, because I don't think we do live in a country where there's two-tier policing as a general rule.
What are you not seeing? Have you been blind and deaf in the last couple of years, with all due respect?
No, I haven't, and I think the police have been working long and hard to resolve the fact that they have rightly been accused of institutional racism a number of times in the last few years, and they've been working hard to resolve that. I don't suggest that all the problems are being ironed out by any stretch of the imagination, but I think they'll be working long and hard towards that goal. But I don't believe that there's two-tier policing in this country, and I don't think that that's a systemic problem. I don't think it's an intended problem. I think individual mistakes will happen, and unfortunately we're living in a week in which there's clearly been a huge mistake made, but that doesn't mean that there's an institutional problem or two-tier policing.
Except an awful lot of police officers, both senior and junior, have said they think that is the problem.
I can't comment on that because, I mean, obviously don't have the
No,
details.
but I mean, is it possible that police officers who are willing to risk speaking out are the ones who are saying the truth rather than us from the outside?
To take a different stance on this, for a long time there's been clear evidence of the fact that black people are more likely to be stopped and searched, for example.
And why is that? We just had this conversation ago. Why is that?
Because there's clearly been a systemic racism problem.
No, that's not clearly. No, there's no clearly about it.
Yes,
there's plenty of reasons why
exactly
young black men are stopped and searched, because young black men are, per capita, far more likely in inner cities where stop and search takes place to be living in inner cities and to be perpetrating those very crimes for which they are being stopped and searched.
The actions of the police in that behaviour are entirely wrong, and it's entirely wrong to criminalise.
We absolutely should not be stopping young men who are more likely to be carrying knives.
There are lots of white men who commit crime as well.
Yes, and they are also stopped and searched.
We're not all stopped and searched. I've never been stopped and searched, for example.
No, and I'm a woman, I don't get stopped and searched, because women largely don't commit crime, but they do stop and search people. You know what happens when you stop and search of young men carrying knives? You get more young men carrying knives and killing each other. And it's largely young black men killing other young black men with knives.
I think what we're discussing...
sorry, those are the facts.
This is all very complicated for the police. They need to navigate this. They need to do the best job that they can. I believe that most of them are doing the best job that they can, and the ones that are not are, I hope, rooted out of the system. And I do believe that the Home Secretary and Keir Starmer as Prime Minister are working to deal with this in the best way that they can.
But again, if you don't identify what the real problem is, you can't solve the problem, can you? Really appreciate you joining us, Mike Buckley. Thank you very much indeed. Benedict, look, we barely got even to the issue of the welfare, but again, we talked about that a lot of times before. And again, that felt very lacklustre. The story out of PMQs was Nigel Farage's clash with the Prime Minister.
Absolutely, and as I say, I think he will probably be not happy at how it's gone, but he knew exactly what it was that he was doing, and I think he'll get the headlines that he wants from it. He is the one that sort of embodies the rage that people feel regardless of whether or not a politician was talking about it. Yeah. Keir Starmer can blame him all he wants, but that rage was there anyway, before Farage spoke. Absolutely.
Benedict Spence, thank you very much. After the break, we are going to be talking, well, about that very subject. We're going to be talking to Rick Pryor. Pryor, former chairman of the Metropolitan Police Federation. Why did he lose his job? Well, because he was one of the people speaking out about exactly the problems we've been identifying. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. 12:39 is the time. Let's go straight to my next guest. He's the former chairman of the Metropolitan Police Federation, Rick Pryor. A very good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining us, Rick.
Good afternoon, Julia. Thanks for
I
having
really
me.
appreciate you joining us. Sorry for keeping you waiting again. PMQs and going to Nigel Farage and so on the subject very much that we are talking about. Now, you were suspended as chairman of the West Midlands Police Federation. You were suspended because you spoke out about the pressure that an awful lot of police officers are under over a lot of exactly the subject we're talking about at the moment, the political correctness, the woke. Just tell us just very briefly what happened to you.
Yes, Julia. I was the former chair of the Metropolitan Police Federation.
Yeah.
So I went on. I did a TV interview with your rival channel on the 8th of October, whereby I articulated a problem that I perceived within the Met, whereby officers were being assumed to have acted in a racially aggravated way in terms of investigations by the IOPC.
Yeah.
And as a consequence of that, I thought that they were becoming hesitant to become engaged in proactive policing. That was the crux of what I said.
And that's the very question. Now, you've been elected, to represent 30,000 rank and file police officers in London, and you were expressing concerns which we know are the concerns of officers. How big an issue is the pressure that officers are under over this DEI, diversity, equity and inclusion? Because police officers I know personally have spoken to me about how the officers that arrived on the scene, Henry Novak, to find him on the ground being told by a Sikh man of colour that he'd been racially aggravated. The 999 call said there'd been a racial attack. There's a white guy on the ground, appears to be drunk. That was the appearance. In fact, that was because he'd been stabbed. He was not drunk. And his lungs were filling up with blood on the ground, but not taking him seriously, deferring to his attackers, as we now know, when they say he hadn't been stabbed, not checking him properly. How much of that DEI training that those officers would have undergone as part of not just Hampshire's but every police force now would have impacted how they judged and how they acted in that situation, do you believe?
Well, I think there is an issue with the police being obsessed with identity politics. That was certainly my experience within the police, certainly within the last 10 to 15 years of my police service. And I think one of the issues is the narrative within DEI, but also within the violence against women and girls strategies, is this narrative that we should believe victims.
Yeah.
I actually had a one-to-one with the commissioner where we had quite a discussion about that, where the Met had said we should believe victims, and I made the point we shouldn't be believing victims any more than we should be believing suspects.
We have alleged suspects and alleged victims.
Yeah, we should be evidence-led, and we should follow the evidence where that goes. And it's a very dangerous thing to believe anybody. And in relation to the case that's the Henry Novak case, I think that all of their training that they would have come to the fore, where it had been relayed to them numerous times that this was a racial incident, and God forbid they deal with a racial incident incorrectly, and that would have been at the forefront of their mind. And that may be able to explain why, in the very initial moments of that very tragic and horrific and distressing incident we've all witnessed, they made the wrong decision.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's absolutely heartbreaking to watch that video. I'm sure you were heartbroken as well, seeing that. I think everyone is. But a lot of people are saying, you've got the likes of Nigel Farage, and not to get party political, it's saying, and actually Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, who was praised by the Prime Minister at PMQ as well, he was very critical of Nigel Farage. But she has talked about how the pendulum has swung too far. We had the horrific murder of a young black man back in 1993, Stephen Lawrence, and then we had the Macpherson report, so that certainly the Metropolitan Police were institutionally racist, and the general view was all police were institutionally racist, but a particular issue in the Met Police in London. We're talking about Hampshire Police in this case, but that there was basically a pendulum that swung, and yes, we need to have that issue tackled, but it seems to have swung far too far. When Nigel Farage and others talk about two-tier policing, and that people are treated differently because of their innate characteristics, colour of their skin, their sexuality, or whatever else. And when the Prime Minister says there is no two-tier policing, who's right?
I think this is a case of the Emperor's new clothes, to be brutally honest, Julia. I fail to see how you can have the London Police Race Action Plan, if you read through that document, and come to any other conclusion that you police a certain demographic one way and you police another demographic another way. And
that's not just the London Police Act, isn't it? The National Police Chiefs Council, they state their goal is producing equality of policing outcomes, and they state explicitly this does not mean treating everyone the same or being colourblind.
Yeah, exactly. The Met actually took on board that and made their, they got their own bespoke one. So there's a national one and there's the Met one. But yeah, I mean, that document I've been calling out for a long time now as the smoking gun of two-tier policing. I don't necessarily agree with all of the observations on two-tier policing that I made, but certainly the Police Race Action Plan would point in that direction.
But how does that actually, materialise? How does that get played out when police officers are called to an incident? What are they doing differently because of this training, because of these action plans, because of the advice from these National Police Chiefs Council and the College of Policing? What are they doing differently with different people than they would have done before?
Well, I can give you an example of how I mean, it's difficult to answer that question with an actual example, but I can give you an example as how the London Police Race Action Plan has affected the policing of Londoners. Yeah. They've got this thing that was explained to me by the Deputy Commissioner, Lynn Owens, called the disproportionality matrix. Yeah. Sounds a very futuristic thing, but this is a part of this London Police Race Action Plan. And what they do is they'll look at a crime and they'll feed it into this matrix, a low-level crime, that is. And if it's deemed to be low-level and disproportionately brings the police into potential conflict with the black community, then they don't deal with that crime. And the case...
You just don't deal with it?
Don't deal. Well, the example I'll give you is the Croydon bus incident, which was the case that I was referring to when I was removed from office. As a direct result of that incident and the negative publicity and the conflict that the Met were brought into with the black community, they stopped policing or stopped supporting Transport for London revenue protection operations. They just stopped doing it.
This was about someone not paying their fare, refusing to get off the bus, and they're accused of racism. So the solution is just not to police it. This kind of explains why a lot of crimes aren't being policed, and that's just to make the figures look better and not look disproportional. And again, that's not just the Met Police. That is what's playing out across the country. That is two-tier policing.
Well, as I said, in terms of this Police Race Action Plan, I think that's clear.
Okay. Just finally, do you have any hope at all that this government, any government, whichever party's in charge, that the institutions, College of Policing, National Council of Police Chiefs, are capable of making a change so that people do have the trust back in the police?
I think they've woven such a complicated spider's web in relation to all of this that it'd be very, very difficult to undo. It would take a long time to undo. So I think the best we can hope for is common sense tweaks and changes and senior officers coming out and
should people be angry about this?
I think people are perfectly entitled to be angry. I would, of course, condemn wholly the violence that we've seen and any attack on frontline police officers, because they're just doing their job. You know, they're police officers, and you know, I can't condemn that.
It doesn't solve anything. It doesn't help anything. It's the wrong thing.
People being angry, of course, they're entitled to be angry when they watch that film.
Rick Pryor, so appreciate you talking to us, former chairman of the Metropolitan Police Federation, on that. 12:48 is time. I'm going to take a quick break. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome. Oh, God, I keep doing that. Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. 12:49 is the time. Things have gone a little bit upside down, thanks to, of course, that PMQ's taking that question from Farage and that response back from Starmer. And that, I know, that's going to lead all the stories for the rest of the day, isn't it? Everyone's having a conversation about what someone says, what someone doesn't say, as opposed to what police do in two-tier policing, which the Prime Minister has denied. Let's talk to John, who's on the line. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch, and John has done just that. John in Sutton, what do you want to say?
Yeah, I am absolutely disgusted at what I've just witnessed at that PMQ.
Yeah.
Laughing, guffawing, like a bunch of hyenas, like a load of chimpanzees. Thank God Nigel Farage was there, and he wanted to talk about the two-tier policing.
Yep.
And they had the cheek to turn round and round on him. And they're supposed to have respect for Henry's family. All that laughing and guffawing and telling jokes. There's nothing funny about what's happening in this country right now, Julia.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I just find it extraordinary. They jeer at him. I don't think they understand how disrespectful it is to voters that they are jeering someone because they politically disagree with them. That said, wasn't it a horrible error by Nigel Farage Benedict Spencer reckons it was deliberate, but not to just state, of course, I condemn the violence that happened last night.
No, he will do, obviously.
Why didn't he do it then and there in PMQs?
I'm not surprised that he didn't, Julia. He wants to get to this two-tier policing that's going on.
Well, the Prime Minister says there isn't two-tier policing.
Sorry?
The Prime Minister says there isn't two-tier policing.
We saw it with our own eyes.
I know.
We just seen it.
I know.
Everyone in the country just witnessed it.
Yeah.
And this liberal use of the term racist that you get from people like Starmer and people on the left and in the media and on a certain radio station that I won't mention the name of. Okay? It's got to stop. That is what has created this sterile atmosphere.
Yeah.
The atmosphere whereby people like Digwa can stab poor Henry and ring the police, mention the word racist,
yeah,
and all of a sudden become the victim.
Yeah. Yeah, I just find it also extraordinary that so many of the politicians and the media commentators who are happy to exploit a murder of a George Floyd 4,000 miles away in 2020. Oh, absolutely, absolutely talk about change everything. But no, you talk about it now. You talk about a murder in this country and the police action there. Oh, no, that's exploitative. You're just playing politics. I mean, it is just extraordinary, isn't it, the double standards on this. John, I appreciate your call. I understand how angry you are. You discussed it. Benedict Spence, your response to what John had to say?
I mean, listen, we can understand, I think, the fury. We've had this actually from a lot of calls throughout the day, that the fury just sort of permeates through because, as John said, we could see it with our own eyes. We could see the two-tier policing, and it doesn't matter that the Prime Minister genuinely doesn't believe that it doesn't exist. Yeah. It's there in the police's own guidelines that they say different groups will be treated differently.
In black and white.
And we've seen the end result of it on camera. I'm sorry, I've had many criticisms of the Prime Minister for other things in the past. What more evidence does he need?
No,
it's in black and white, it's in front of his eyes.
Absolutely. Now, I mentioned Andy Burnham earlier. You know what that means, folks? Put the kettle on. I've got to list all the candidates in Makerfield. Sorry, I've got to get this done very, very quickly. Then we're going to go to our competition. They are in the Makerfield by-election. Jay Costigan, the Liberal Democrats, Count Binface Party, Andy Burnham, the Labour Party, Dan Clark, the Libertarian Party, John Dyer, Independent, Ed Gemmell, Climate Party, Paul Gould, Independent, and Alan Howling, Lord Hope, the official Monster Raving Looney Party, Robert Kenyon, Reform UK, Robert Powell, North Protect the Wild, Rebecca Shepherd, Restore Britain, Sarah Wakefield, Green Party, Peter Ward, Rejoin EU, Michael Winstanley, the Conservative Party. There you go. More excitingly, the FIFA World Cup kicks off next Thursday, and our friends at TalkSport just down the corridor are sending you and a mate straight to New York City with Adidas, the tournament's official match ball supplier. It's the ultimate trip to watch England face Panama live at the MetLife Stadium. Return flights, hotel, match tickets and spending money all taken care of. Plus, Adidas is throwing in the official Trionda match ball and a fresh pair of boots as well. So don't miss out. Here's how to enter.
For your chance to win, head to our friends at talksportwin.com or text TALK to 83338. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate, or call 0343 418 7260. Lines close on the 12th of June 2026 at 4 p.m. That's when you'll need to answer your phone if it rings. 18 plus UK residents only. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talksportwin.com. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
12:57 is the time. Let's squeeze in one last call on all of this topic with Henry Novak and everyone's comments on it. Simon is in Bedfordshire. Simon, what do you want to say, my love? I'm sorry time is so tight.
No, no problem. Thank you for having me on the show. Of course, Henry Novak passing is absolutely sad and it shouldn't have happened. I've just been hearing a lot of people speaking about the situation and, of course, speaking about if there was racism, the overcorrection. But I think people are not thinking about how we've got here.
Yep.
And really it comes from history in the 90s where there was racial profiling and whatnot.
By the police, yeah, absolutely.
Yes. But I think and it was there, and there's lots of investigations and reports about that. But I think over time it's gotten better. But I think that BLM with George Floyd really caused that overcorrection.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the problem is, because of course white people look like they've been there's racism towards them, which is absolutely true, because frankly, if there's police are not treating everyone equally, that's definitely a problem.
That's what racism is.
Yes, and the thing is, I think people aren't thinking this is what we were having as black people. I am a black British in the 90s and 2000s.
Yeah.
And I think people have to look at where it has come from and why is it happening. In this present day, this should not be happening.
Yeah, and again, it's still racism. It's still wrong. We want a correction back to the middle, where you as a black man are not, treated as more likely to be criminal